Sensei, Sensei, class started 2 minutes ago and you're just standing there holding the attendance sheet. That was a purple-haired little gremlin named Kiko, and she was right. I was standing in front of 30 small children in a Ninja Academy classroom holding a piece of paper and having the single worst realization of my life. Because up until about 90 seconds ago, my name was Wu Wei. I lived in an apartment with questionable plumbing, and my biggest problem was a deadline. Now my name was Kenjiro Maeda. I was 18 years old, and I was a teacher at the Ninja Academy in Konoha, the Hidden Leaf Village. Yes, that Konoha. And here's the fun part. The memories that came flooding in told me I wasn't just a teacher, I was a root agent. Zaku's people had raised the original owner of this body from childhood, trained him into an emotionless little chess piece, and planted him in the academy as a sleeper spy. There was a cursed tongue eradication seal sitting on my tongue right that second. Say one word about Root's secrets, and my brain shuts off like a cheap lamp. I had been in this world for a minute and a half, and I was already property. Cool. Very cool. Love that for me. I checked my own stats the way you check your wallet after a mugging. Chakra, 4,300. For context, that made me elite chunin-flavored cannon fodder. In a world where the local monks throw mountains at each other, I was a guy with a slightly nicer stick. My combat evaluation, if I translated it honestly, read, dies in the second panel of someone else's fight scene. Then the second thing arrived, and the second thing changed everything. A screen unfolded in my head, polite and glowing, and told me I had a teacher system. Teach well, get rewards. Finish a lecture, and the students actually learn something, get graded, and grades pay out. Take personal disciples. Every hour they train, a cut of their growth flows back to me. The stronger my students got, the stronger I got. Someone in the universe's admin department had looked at this murder village and decided the most broken cheat available should go to the guy grading spelling tests. Fine. If the world wanted a teacher, it was going to get the most dangerous teacher in shinobi history. I looked down at the attendance sheet with new eyes. Class 1-1, first years. Kashiwa Kiko, currently glaring at me for wasting instructional time. Two boys named Renzo and Jiro who were trying to eat the same rice cracker from both ends. And in the third row, a quiet kid with soft black hair and eyes way too calm for a 6-year-old. Sora Haruno. If you know, you know. That's not a student. That's a future legend with a canon death date, sitting there worrying about multiplication. I put the sheet down, smiled the gentle smile that came pre-installed with this face, and taught. The scheduled topic was village history, which the textbook rendered with all the excitement of a tax form, so I threw out the textbook voice and told it like gossip. The Warring States era as the world's worst neighborhood feud. Daisuke and Akio as two men who kept trying to kill each other and kept accidentally becoming friends instead. The Will of Fire not as a slogan but as a bet. The bet that children protected together grow up stronger than children raised as weapons. 30 kids leaned forward at the same time like sunflowers. Kiko forgot to look tough. The Cracker twins forgot the cracker. When the bell rang, the system chimed once, soft as a cash register. Lecture grade, A. Rewards, sensory ninjutsu, appraisal technique. Fire nature transformation, mastery level, 3 rewards, 1 lecture. I mastered fire chakra by explaining a war to children. Somewhere out there, ninja were doing push-ups over lava for a fraction of what I just got for talking with my hands. I tested the appraisal on the way out, glancing at students like a scout at a horse market. Little windows bloomed over their heads. Kiko, A-grade potential, sharp and fearless, will absolutely bite someone someday. The Cracker twins, B- apiece, bless them. The village needs gate guards too. Then I looked at Sora, and the window said SS-, and I closed it very calmly and looked out at the weather before my face did anything expensive. This school had handed me a lottery ticket in a tiny green jacket, and the school had no idea, and I intended to keep it that way. Sora hung back after class. He shuffled up to my desk with his hands at his sides, dark eyes serious, and asked the question that was eating him from the inside. Sensei, why does everyone in the village look at Haruno like that? Like that. 6 years old, and he already knew exactly what "like that" meant. The sideways glances, the shopkeepers who got quieter, the parents who steered their kids a few steps wider on the street. 6 years old and already carrying the whole clan on his back like a school bag. Now, I could have said something warm and useless about how everyone is equal in the Will of Fire. Instead, I made an investment. I lowered my voice, glanced at the door like a man sharing a secret, and told him my parents had been saved in the last war by an Haruno, a man named Haruno Akihiko, that I owed the Haruno a debt I could never repay, and that anyone who looked at his clan like that could take it up with me. Haruno Akihiko, Sora's own grandfather. Was the story true? Absolutely not. I invented it on the spot with the calm face of a man reading a menu. But watch what it did. The kid's eyes went wide, then wet, then bright, and the wall around him came down like it had never been built. The loneliest genius in the village suddenly had one adult who was on his side for a reason he could believe. Sumi. In this place, honesty was a luxury, and that boy needed an ally more than I needed a clean conscience. A few days later, he showed up at my door after class, hovering on the step like he wasn't sure the invitation had been real. I took him to the practice field behind the building, asked what fire release he knew, and then showed him mine. A fireball the size of a garden shed, rolling heat across the yard until the fence posts steamed. His mouth made a small, perfect circle. Then I sat him down and told him Haruno history. His own clan was too proud to explain to a child. The real mechanics of why the village and the clan grind against each other. And I watched a 6-year-old listen like a war minister. I can teach you, I said, properly, if you want. He said yes before I finished the sentence. The system lit up like a slot machine. Disciple slot 1 of 4, Sora Haruno. Trust level 2, all growth feedback doubled. And before you play the game in your head, believe me, I played it first. No, I could not just sign up all 300 students in the building and retire into a chakra ocean. 4 slots, that's the cap. And the good stuff only flows when the child actually trusts you. On a ladder, the system tracks, and you cannot fake, farm, or speedrun. The system didn't pay for warm bodies, it paid for warm hearts, which meant my get-rich-quick scheme had a horrifying core mechanic. I had to genuinely be a good teacher, for years, to actual children. I gave Sora a welcome gift that first evening, a training manual I copied out by hand, annotated in the margins for his level. He held it with both hands like state treasure, and the system did something new. It rolled a critical hit off the kid's gratitude and dropped Great Dragonfire technique into my head, proficient level, free of charge. So, gifts plus gratitude equaled bonus loot, with crit chance scaling off how much the gift meant. I stared at that mechanic the way you stare at an unattended buffet. This system didn't just want me teaching, it wanted me beloved. It had monetized being somebody's favorite person. That night, I sat in my little root-issued apartment and did the math on my situation like a man reviewing a loan. Asset column, a broken system, a genius disciple, a face so trustworthy that grandmothers already gave me vegetables. Debt column, a seal on my tongue and a mummy-wrapped war criminal who thought he owned me, and a world scheduled to set itself on fire within the decade. Every exit from Zaku went through one of 3 doors. Kill him, which currently ranked somewhere below Kill the Moon in feasibility. Acquire Orochimaru tier ceiling knowledge and cut the leash myself. Or become someone so publicly valuable that the Hokage pries me out of root with his own 2 political hands. I picked door 3, with doors 2 and 1 as backup, in that order. Then I went to bed, because unlike every other transmigrator in recorded history, I had a staff meeting in the morning. The staff room, by the way, turned out to be the least deadly place in Konoha, and I loved it immediately. My deskmate, Tanaka Hiroki, spent his salary on blind dates the way other men spend it on rent, and kept a running tally of failures that deserved a memorial plaque. Suzuki Hana graded papers like an executioner with a quota. Saito Takeshi had opinions about tea, all of them wrong, all of them delivered with total confidence. Normal people, doing normal jobs in a village that trains child soldiers. The contrast was almost restful. I volunteered to cover Tanaka's class once so he could go meet a girl, and he nearly cried into his lesson plans. And somewhere far away, in a tower, the 3rd Hokage watched the new root-trained teacher be kind to his colleague through a crystal ball and stroked his beard and updated a file. I knew he watched. I was counting on it. Every kind thing I did in that school had 2 audiences, the children in front of me and the old man in the glass. Both audiences were being told the same true lie, that Kenjiro Maeda was wasted on Zaku. Day 2, I taught chakra theory to my first years with a drawing of a pond and a bucket, and pulled another A. Reward, multiple shadow clone technique, the forbidden one, the one that splits a man into a study group. Jonin would bleed out for that scroll, and the universe handed it to me because my bucket metaphor landed with 7-year-olds. Then I substituted for class 2 to 4, the 4th years, the graduating class, and my appraisal had the best day of its short life. In the second row, I found a sweet-faced girl named Yua, B+, with medical-grade chakra control so clean it practically squeaked. Beside her, a boy in a green jumpsuit doing push-ups between the desks because sitting still was, quote, wasted youth. Spirit guy, potential S, with a physical talent rating under the hood that bent my scale. And in the back row, a boy with goggles pushed up on his forehead, asleep face down in a puddle of his own drool, ranked dead last of my entire grade. Haruno Kaito, potential S. And beneath that, 2 dormant traits that nearly made me drop the chalk. 6 paths bloodline, spatial affinity. The class clown drooling on his desk was carrying god-tier genetics and a teleportation talent, and his current report card said he'd lose a fight to a ladder. I stood at that podium, looking out at the roster, the future Copy Ninja's rival, the future Hokage's whole squad, the doomed generation from the saddest flashbacks in anime history, and felt the plan click into place like a blade into a sheath. They all die badly, you know. In the story I remember, Yua dies with her best friend's hand through her chest. Kaito gets crushed under a boulder, harvested by a legend, and twisted into the man who ruins my world. Guy's father burns all 8 gates to save his son and turns to ash mid-victory. Sora hands over his eyes and steps backward off a cliff to weaponize his own death. Not in my class. Not on my schedule. Recruiting Kaito and Guy took exactly 1 scam. I posted a notice, special weekend training session for exam preparation, open to motivated 4th years, real ninjutsu awarded for progress. Totally official sounding, absolutely invented. Kaito showed up because the words free and reward appeared in the same sentence. Guy showed up because the word training triggers something ancient in his DNA, the way dogs hear a leash. I took them to a riverbank outside the training grounds and started with a diagnostic, which for Kaito meant a mock written test, and I want to describe his face when I produced paper on a Saturday. The trail. Grief. The face of a man who came for a party and found an ambush. He scored so low the score was basically a cry for help, and Guy scored lower, and the two of them bonded instantly in the foxhole of shared academic disgrace. Then we did the real work. Footwork drills until their legs shook. Chakra control until Kaito's leaf caught fire by accident, which I told him was a promising sign, which made him try to set every leaf on the riverbank alight with pride. I taught them a real Konoha whirlwind, the actual combat version, not the schoolyard one, and when Guy landed it clean, he stood there staring at his own leg like it had said something profound. At sundown, I grilled fish over an open fire and fed them until they lay in the grass like defeated snakes. Kaito, flat on his back, full of trout, said to the sky, "Sensei, is it like this every week?" "Every week," I said, "for students of mine." They practically signed in blood. By the second weekend, the system logged disciples 2 and 3, trust level 2 apiece, feedback multipliers stacking. The dead last and the talentless taijutsu kid. My roster now held the grade's 2 biggest jokes, and my appraisal said I was hoarding 2 S ranks while the village giggled at them. I have never held better stock at a worse price. Then Root reminded me I was on a leash. I came home one night to a masked figure standing in my dark apartment like a coat rack with opinions. Codename Protocols. A scroll with Zaku's seal. The messenger's chakra read 7,000. Root's idea of a mailman could have killed the old me twice before breakfast. The orders? Continue observing Sora Haruno. Report on his development. I bowed, said it would be done, and burned the scroll after he ghosted out the window. Then I stood in the dark doing arithmetic. Zaku wanted eyes on Sora because Zaku collects Haruno eyes the way other old men collect stamps. The man asking me to spy on my student was the same man who, in the timeline I remembered, ambushes that student in a river valley and takes his eye as a souvenir. My handler was my endgame boss, and my monthly reports were going to be the finest fiction I ever produced. Height, weight, adequate fireball, average attitude. Nothing to see here, sir. Please continue not noticing that I am raising your future assassin. School life rolled on, and I found the rhythm of my new farm. Lectures by day, and every A grade dropped another jutsu into my skull like a vending machine with a broken lock. Water wall, a curtain of river standing up on command. Water dragon bullet, lightning clone. And then one Tuesday, because my pond diagram was apparently extra lucid, the system handed me water-severing wave, the second Hokage's personal blade of pressurized water, a technique so difficult that maybe 5 living people could use it. I stood at the podium accepting a wave of small applause for a history lecture, while my brain quietly installed the signature move of a god, and I thought, this is the best job in the world, and nobody can ever know why. My B-grade experiments mapped the machine's edges. The system graded on how much the kids actually absorbed, not effort, not applause, retention. So I sharpened every lesson like a kunai. Shorter sentences, better stories, questions that made small brains reach. Somewhere in week 2, I stopped being the new teacher and became the teacher. Students from other classes started loitering outside my door. Grandmothers on my walking route began pressing vegetables into my hands on principle. Suzuki Hana asked me, with narrowed executioner eyes, what my trick was. My trick was a divine incentive structure, Hana, but also better stories. Evenings belonged to the disciples, and the disciples were a nature documentary. Sora learned Great Dragon Fire in one attempt, and then apologized for it, looking up at my twitching eye like he'd broken something. Kaito treated every written question as a personal insult from the concept of literacy, but ran physical drills until his legs gave out and then argued with his legs. Guy did everything Kaito did, twice, backwards, narrating his youth like a sports commentator possessed by a motivational poster. I grilled fish, refereed disputes, patched scrapes, and watched the dead last and the jumpsuit kid weld themselves into best friends over charred trout, and under all of it, the system ticked steadily upward, feedback from 3 growing bodies flowing into mine. Gratitude was currency. Dinner was investment strategy. My chakra crossed 5,000, then 6, without a single push-up. The adults, meanwhile, played their own game over my head. Zaku sent word through channels. Praise for my academic cover, hints of a special Jonin promotion, the flattery a farmer wastes on a horse. I burned his scrolls and felt nothing. The man could promote me to Emperor of the Moon. He was still the endgame boss with my leash in his desk. The Hokage side moved differently, and it moved through a library. I had started spending evenings in the village archives, digging through sealing theory. Fuinjutsu was exit door number 2, the science that could someday cut Zaku's seal off my tongue, and that is where I met my neighbor properly for the first time. Golden hair catching the lamplight, gentle smile, the kind of face that makes strangers hand him their babies and their secrets in the same motion. Daiki Kazama, browsing the same shelf. My appraisal opened his file, and I kept my breathing very even. Chakra, 40,000. Skill list, a column of masteries that could be summarized as kills Jonin like weeds. The future fourth Hokage was standing 2 shelves over in a cardigan of a personality, and when he saw my armload of ceiling texts, his whole face lit up, a Fuinjutsu enthusiast finding another one in the wild. We talked seals for an hour. He recommended authors. I took notes like a good student and filed the real note underneath. This man is the best sealing mind of his generation. He lives next to the second best, and both of them are now disposed to like me. Here's the thing nobody warned you about, Daiki. He and I had nearly the same face, same warm smile, same golden boy glow, his hair sun yellow, mine a shade off. Strangers would spend the next year asking if we were brothers. Twins, long-lost siblings separated by a dramatic backstory. We were not related in any way. This will come up roughly 400 more times, so get comfortable. Exams arrived. My first years marched in like a military parade. Kiko had personally threatened anyone whose grades might get me reassigned, which is both illegal and adorable, and which I officially did not endorse, and privately graded A for initiative. The written results came back, and the class average jumped high enough that the office asked me to share methodology. Methodology. Divine cheat plus caring. Not reproducible, sorry. But the 4th year practical was where my investments went public. Kaito drew Haruno Ryuji in the bracket, a proper clan kid, polished by family training, a boy who had beaten Kaito in every spar since they were in sandals, and had stopped considering it interesting. Ryuji walked into the ring with the relaxed shoulders of a man collecting a routine win. Kaito walked in and, for the first time in his life, was not the same Kaito. He opened with the dragonfire I'd taught him, cut off Ryuji's angles with heat, herded him around the arena like a sheepdog with a grudge, and took the match clean. The school stopped chewing. You could hear the moment 300 worldviews hit a pothole at speed. The dead last had just eaten a clan genius on the main stage, and up in the stands the teachers were checking each other's eyes for genjutsu. The system pinged. Kaito's trust jumped a level on the spot. Because winning in public, in front of every single person who ever laughed at you, is the strongest medicine this world sells. I watched him look around the silent gym, find my face, and grin like a sunrise. That grin was worth more than the jutsu it cost me. Don't tell the system. Then the class final put my 2 disciples in the same ring, Guy against Kaito. They went at each other like it was a war for the last dumpling on Earth, whirlwind kicks against dragonfire, 2 boys with everything to prove, proving it at maximum volume. And my green one took first on pure physical insanity. Final class ranking. The talentless kid first, the dead last second. The rest of my class filed out looking like survivors of a natural disaster, which, pedagogically speaking, they were. The grade final brought my boys back to Earth, and I led it. A Hyuga prodigy named Ryo, 4th year royalty, gentle fists, zero mercy, took both of them apart with that polite Hyuga cruelty and won the year. Kaito fumed. Guy declared 500 laps of penance. Good. A wall to climb is worth more than a trophy to hold. I made a note to keep Ryo's schedule in mind the way a chef keeps a whetstone. In the first year bracket, meanwhile, Sora took first place while barely breathing hard. Kiko took second and bit no one, which for her was growth. And I bought the whole class dango and let them climb me like municipal playground equipment. Exam rewards flowed. Chakra for Sora's perfect score, a proficiency scroll, warm numbers everywhere. The fallout reached the top floor within the week. The principal summoned me. The 3rd Hokage happened to be in the office, the way weather happens. Konosuke Sarutobi in person, the god of shinobi, professor of 1,000 jutsu, pipe smoke and grandfather wrinkles wrapped around 170,000 chakra by my appraisal's sworn testimony. I put a number on a mountain, and the number said mountain. He gave me an outstanding teacher award and the news that a special jonin promotion was being processed. And then, stroking his beard, almost as an afterthought, which with this man is never what it looks like, he asked whether I might have weekends free to tutor a certain struggling student, his son, Kenta. Let me translate the politics for you. Zaku had planted me near the academy's children. Konosuke was now planting me next to his own child, which was either the deepest gesture of trust available in this village, or the most elegant surveillance program ever designed. And knowing that old man, it was both at once, and he'd have been proud of either reading. Zaku approved it from his side within the day, practically drooling at the vision of his sleeper agent whispering into the Hokage's bloodline. 2 spy masters, 1 tutor, both convinced I was their asset in the other's house. I accepted at the posted rate of 2,000 Ryo an hour and privately cataloged it as the funniest revenue stream in the land of fire. I also moved. The original owner's parents had left a house in the main district. They died in the last war, the house sat closed, and I chose it over the route-adjacent apartment. Sentimental reasons on paper, get out of the surveillance radius reasons in practice. The house needed airing, the garden needed mercy, and the neighbor over the fence turned out to be Daiki. Of course it was. The universe has a casting budget, and it reuses sets. And through Daiki came the hurricane. A red-haired young woman kicked his gate open one evening, yelled something about him hoarding good tea, spotted me over the fence, and demanded to know why there were 2 of him now. Aoi Akane. My appraisal opened her file and I nearly watered my own shoes. Chakra reading 150,000, with a footnote the size of a continent. Right, the Ninetales. The strongest tailed beast on the planet was sealed inside the loud girl currently accusing my neighbor of tea crimes, and she was carrying that apocalypse around while complaining about vegetable prices. I introduced myself, offered tea from my own allegedly superior stock, and decided on the spot that this friendship was happening at whatever price the market set. Kenta, though. Kenta was a project. 10 years old, fresh genin, allergic to authority, convinced the world only saw him as the Hokage's son, mostly because the world only saw him as the Hokage's son. I arrived for our first session and he greeted me with arms crossed and the opening bid of every rich kid in history. I don't need a tutor, you can go. So I went. That's the whole trick. I said all right, picked up my bag, and walked. No lecture, no bargaining, no adult voice. I made it 11 steps before a small panic sound happened behind me. Wait, I didn't mean leave, because in 10 years of tantrums, no adult had ever taken one at face value. Tantrums are a currency, and I had just declined to accept it. We renegotiated on my terms, on the spot, both of us pretending the last 30 seconds hadn't happened. Teaching is mostly economics with extra steps. Then I got to work on his body and his pride simultaneously. I oiled a training tree, actually oiled it, slick as a politician, and told him to climb it with chakra alone. He slid off it for an hour, swearing in ways that would have gotten him grounded, and stuck the landing at sunset out of pure spite. I put him on the pond for water walking and shot water dragon bullets at his ankles to motivate his balance, which he described as attempted murder and I described as interval training. And somewhere in there, conversationally, I mentioned my rate, 25,000 Rio an hour. A lie. A gigantic, magnificent lie. My real rate was 2,000. But watch the machinery turn. The kid did the math, realized his father was allegedly hemorrhaging a fortune on him, and started training like a demon just to make sure the old man wasn't wasting money. Guilt, weaponized, in a good cause. He drilled through my sessions without one complaint, muttering the hourly figure to himself like a mantra. The invoice arrived at a Saratobi family dinner, where Kenta, magnanimously to his father, announced he was aware of the tutoring costs and had decided to be worth them. Konosuke, puzzled, named the actual figure, 2,000. Kenta came to our next session at a dead sprint, vibrating with the fury of a scammed customer, and yelled at me for 10 unbroken minutes. I let him finish, agreed the lie had been outrageous, and pointed at the pond because by then it was already too late. He was stronger, he could feel he was stronger, and pride in your own progress doesn't refund. He grumbled his way onto the water and kept training. The scam had served its purpose and dissolved like sugar. But the real repair was deeper, and it happened in 2 moves. Move 1. I listened. One session he boiled over, about being the Hokage's son, about teachers who graded his name instead of his work, about a father who governed a village but communicated with his own child exclusively through disappointment. I didn't correct him. I didn't defend the old man. I sat on the pond's edge and let a 10-year-old empty the whole drawer, and at the end, I said the sentence nobody had bothered to say. That sounds exhausting. He looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language he'd been waiting his whole life to hear. Move 2. I broke him, with love, using a 6-year-old. I arranged a friendly spar between Kenta and Sora, the Hokage's son versus my first-year disciple, 3 years his junior and a head shorter. Kenta went in smirking. Sora folded him like laundry, cleanly, kindly, without a single wasted motion, the way you'd close an umbrella. Kenta sat in the dirt afterward and cried the hot, furious tears of a boy whose excuses had just been repossessed. And then he stood up, wiped his face, and actually asked, how do I get that strong? From that day, he was mine. He trained without being pushed. He improved fast enough to surprise his Jonin instructor, and his loyalty ran so deep that he would spend the next year loudly informing the third Hokage, his own father, the god of shinobi, professor of 1,000 jutsu, that Maeda-sensei explained things better. At family dinners, in front of guests, somewhere behind a crystal ball, an old man watched his unreachable son do handstand push-ups voluntarily and exhaled 20 years of parental guilt, and my stock in the Hokage's office quietly split and doubled. I'm not saying I plan for the Hokage's son to become my hype man. I'm saying the system rewards good teaching, and I am a very good teacher. Meanwhile, back at the academy, Kaito came to me with a request that opened an entire new game mode. The youth ninjutsu competition was coming. A village event, merchants and parents in the stands, prizes, prestige, the works. And Kaito planted himself in front of me after class, fists clenched, and asked for a fire release strong enough to take first place. Not to pass, to win. The dead last wanted a crown in public. The moment he said it out loud, the system unfolded a screen I'd never seen. Cultivation quest. Disciple Haruno Kaito wishes to win first place in the youth ninjutsu competition. Assist him. Reward on completion. I read it 3 times. The system didn't just pay me for teaching skills, it paid me for making their dreams come true. Their ambitions were my quest log. Somewhere in my chest, something did a slow, warm, extremely mercenary somersault, and I put my hand on Kaito's head and told him we'd start tomorrow. Step 1 was inspiration. I took him to the river and showed him what fire release means at the far end of the road. A fireball 10 meters across, rolled out over the water, boiling the shallows and sending a wall of steam downriver like weather. Kaito's soul visibly left his body through his open mouth. When it returned, it had signed a contract. Step 2 was the boring part, because in my experience, the boring part is always the real part. Nature transformation drills. Hold an ice cube, melt it with fire-natured chakra. Again. My student versus ice became the saga of that week. He glared at cubes, blamed cubes, developed theories about defective ice, claimed his hands ran too warm for science, and once accused a passing cat of judging him. The cat had, to be fair, been judging him. So I cheated with cuisine. My system had dropped a skill called chef on me. Any dish I cooked came out transcendent, and at full effect, it caused honest-to-goodness sensory hallucinations. Not poetry, neurology. I fed Kaito a mapo tofu so spicy his brain rendered a full erupting volcano, first-person view, lava included. And while he stood there breathing fumes with tears streaming down his face, I leaned in and said, "Remember exactly this heat. Now push your chakra the same way." Next drill, the kid opened his mouth and breathed actual fire. Modern education, folks. Sometimes the textbook is a bowl of tofu. He melted his ice cube, then the tray, then nearly the table, and ran a victory lap around the yard screaming that he was a dragon now. The hallucination kitchen had side effects, and the side effects had golden hair. One evening, the smell of my tempura drifted over the fence and summoned my neighbors like a summoning jutsu. Daiki and Akane appeared at the gate with the exact expressions of two people following a beautiful sound off a cliff. I set 2 more places. Akane took 1 bite, gripped the table, and demanded to know what I had done to normal food. Daiki ate with the polite fixed intensity of a man having a religious experience quietly. 1 dinner, and they were regulars. And then Akane spotted my bookshelf, the ceiling text stacked from my library runs, and pulled one out and went still. The author's name on the spine, Aoi Toru, her clan, her destroyed, scattered clan, alive in ink on a stranger's shelf. She turned to me with a completely different face and asked why a school teacher was studying Aoi Fuin Jutsu, and I told her the truth with the dangerous parts sanded off. Because sealing is the deepest art this world has, and nobody teaches it anymore. Wrong answer to say to a proud Aoi, if your goal is to be left alone. Exactly the right answer if your goal is what happened. She appointed herself my sealing tutor on the spot, jabbing a thumb at her own chest, declaring that lessons started immediately, and that I was lucky because I was learning from Konoha's #1 sealing mistress. I had come to this village owned by a spy master, hunting seal-breaking knowledge through dusty archives. Now the 2 best Fuinjutsu practitioners of the era were fighting over who got to teach me faster, and one of them was doing it in exchange for tempura. The universe kept handing me coupons, and I kept clipping them. The competition needed a full field to mean anything, and one contestant was refusing to exist. Ren. Silver hair, mask, tune in at 8, socially unavailable at all hours. My student learned his rival wasn't entering and took it as a personal insult to the concept of winning. Beating a bracket without Ren in it was, in his words, like winning an eating contest against people who aren't hungry. So we ran a con. And by we, I mean 2 9-year-olds improvised, and I approved the invoice afterward. Kaito and Yua visited Ren with a bet. Hold a leaf in your palm without burning it. Loser owes the winner a favor. Ren held his leaf, flawless chakra control, smug as a cat. Kaito burned his own leaf on purpose, declared that real fire users can't help igniting things, and announced this proved superior elemental talent. The logic was insane. The logic was designed to be insane. Ren entered the competition specifically to punish it. Children are easy to drive when you know where the pedals are, and Ren's pedals are labeled, "Someone is wrong," and it's Kaito. Competition day. Village square, merchant banners, parents with picnic blankets, judges at a long table. My first years opened the program, and I use the word opened loosely, because what Renzo and Jiro unveiled was the technique my class had been secretly developing all term, the enemy confusion technique, a transformation-based decoy, which, executed by 2 9-year-olds, meant that in the middle of the demonstration area, with a bang of smoke, they turned into a chair. A chair. A single, ordinary, 4-legged chair. The judges stared at the chair. The chair, containing 2 boys holding their breath, stared back. Somewhere, a cricket found the silence disrespectful. They received participation scores and a standing ovation from me personally, because that chair walked, so something much worse could one day run, but we'll get to show. Then the main bracket. Kaito stepped up, planted his feet, and put a 4-meter fireball into the sky with the breathing calm of a boy watering plants. Perfect score, and a visible wave of parents asking each other who that Haruno kid was. Ren answered with a flawless technical performance of his own, precision like a printed diagram. The judges deadlocked. I drifted over to the merchant sponsors and gently suggested a tie for first place would let both clans of customers leave happy. And merchants understand happy customers the way fish understand water. Tie for first. My student on the podium goggles up, grinning at the exact spot in the crowd where Yua was clapping. And in my head, the chime. Quest complete. Chakra plus 800. Ninjutsu proficiency scroll. Yin release fundamentals. My chakra crossed 8,000, nearly double my starting balance, farmed entirely from lectures, dinners, and one child's daydream. My appraisal brushed over Ren on the way out of the square and printed Potential S. Of course, this village grows S ranks like tomatoes and then composts them in wars. Not this batch. This batch I was keeping. I also finished a private side project that month. The system's rewards had included a mastery of chakra-shaped transformation, and I'd been quietly assembling something in my backyard. A small rotating sphere of pure chakra, spinning against itself in every direction at once, grinding whatever it touched into regret. Yes, that one. The Rasengan. I built the Fourth Hokage's signature technique years early, in a garden from spare parts, and then I put it on a shelf. Using it in public would raise questions with extremely sharp edges, but someday the actual inventor next door was going to hit a wall trying to create it, and when that day came, his kind neighbor would be sitting on the answer like a hen on an egg. Long-term investments, a teacher's portfolio, because here's the clock I lived under, the one I checked every night while the village slept. The Third Great Ninja War was warming up in the wings. Kumogakure was already creeping through the land of hot springs. The Third Kazekage had just vanished without a ripple, and if you know the canon, you know that disappearance is the loose thread the whole decade unravels from. I had roughly 4 years before the meat grinder, before a boulder crushes Kaito, before Yua dies on a hand of lightning, before Guy's father burns his life for his son, before Sora's eyes become collectibles. Every dinner I cooked, every jutsu I taught, every trust level I farmed was a sandbag stacked against that flood. The system kept handing me sandbags faster than I could stack them. Guy asked me for a training plan. Just a plan, a schedule, the humblest request in the history of requests, and the quest that spawned from it paid out 20 training elixirs and, on the gift crit, the 8 gates. The actual 8 inner gates. The first 3, gift-wrapped, deposited in my brain with usage notes. I taught them to Guy immediately, because in what universe do I keep Guy's own signature inheritance from Guy, and watched him open the gate of opening for the first time. His skin flushed, his chakra roared, and he punched a training log into the next tax bracket, then turned to me with tears already streaming because his body finally had a road that talent couldn't gatekeep. I made a private note that this kid's gratitude was going to bankrupt the system someday, and the note would age well. Trust climbed the whole roster that spring. Sora hit level 3 after a weekend hot pot. The 5 of us hunted a wild boar, which mostly meant I hunted a boar while 3 children provided commentary, and we ate it down to the architecture. Mid-laughter, Sora went quiet, and I watched a 6-year-old orphan do silent math on what a family dinner feels like from the inside. The system chimed before he finished his bowl. Guy hit 3 off the back of his exam wins. Kaito was already there. The feedback multipliers stacked, my chakra pool swelled on their sweat and their happiness both, and I stood in the middle of it like a man who has discovered compound interest in a world of piggy banks. Then I did something slightly evil, and I want my defense on the record before you judge me. The first years had a taijutsu teacher named Tanimura, a decent, harmless man with the teaching instincts of a damp sock. His class was an hour of wasted reward potential per day, multiplied by every student in it. So I engineered a small, polite student revolt. A nudge here. Physical fundamentals decide who survives their first mission, you know. A comparison there, letting my disciples' footwork speak for itself at recess. Within 2 weeks, Class 1-1 had collectively decided they wanted me for physical education and made Tanimura's lessons a diplomatic crisis. Tanimura, besieged and baffled, came to me for advice. I spoke to the students on his behalf, carefully, in exactly the way that made them dig in harder. And then, when the administration went looking for a solution, the solution was standing right there in glasses, already beloved, tragically willing. I took over the class. My lecture income doubled overnight. And to Tanimura, I had apologized to him in advance, privately, sincerely, before the first domino tipped, which he took as modest kindness, and which was actually a confession he lacked the context to read. The defense rests on one fact. Those kids got a teacher who could actually teach them not to die. The prosecution may keep the moral high ground. I kept the rewards, and the kids kept their future limbs. Everyone got something. The problems per hit training era also began that season, and with it, Kaito's beautiful doomed war against mathematics. The drill, dodge my shadow clone. Every failure generates written homework questions. Simple, motivating, cruel. Kaito's balance grew by the week, and his debt grew by the session. 35 questions, 60. Once 100, at which point he requested an installment plan, and I granted it, at interest, because financial literacy is also education. He sought outside help exactly once. He asked Ren. Ren agreed to tutor him, defined tutoring as nightly taijutsu beatings that would build the focus required for study, and delivered them with visible satisfaction. Kaito came to me limping and outraged. I asked if his focus had improved. It had. Case closed. And in the quiet channel underneath all of it, the Fuinjutsu track ran hot. Akane taught me the one-finger sealing basics between cooking lessons. I mastered them in half a day and performed a respectable 7-day struggle for her benefit because a root sleeper agent who speed learns sealing arts is a sleeper agent who has an accident. Then 3-finger, mastered in 6 days, faked 27. My real notebook, the one nobody saw, tracked one project only. The architecture of the cursed tongue eradication seal, sketched from the inside, one careful evening at a time. Every lesson Akane laughed through was another pick in the lock Zaku thought he owned. Final exams closed out the term, and my favorite recurring sitcom aired its season finale first. All term, Renzo and Jiro had been telling Kiko that studying was for suckers, that real ninja wing it, that cramming was a betrayal of the shinobi spirit. All term, the two of them had been secretly studying at each other's houses like criminals running a printing press. Results day. Renzo 100, Jiro 100. Kiko, who had believed them because friendship, 78. The betrayal registered on her face in geological stages: confusion, realization, tectonic shift. Then she chased them both through the school corridors, howling about fraud while they fled in perfect synchronized terror, and I graded the whole incident A for cardio. Sora, above such politics, took first in the year again while barely creasing his uniform. But the real earthquake was scheduled for the fourth-year finals, and I'd been loading the fault line all term. Guy versus Hyuga Ryo. The rematch nobody was asking for, because everybody already knew how it went. Ryo was the grade's crown prince, gentle fist royalty, the wall both my boys had broken against last time. He came in composed, Guy came in breathing. It lasted about as long as a sneeze. My student closed the distance like a thrown spear, ate Ryo's counter on his forearms without slowing, and hit him with everything a year of my conditioning and his own animal discipline had built. Ryo went down. The gym went silent the way crowds go silent when the world order files for bankruptcy in public. The talentless kid, the charity case, the boy my school kept out of its yearbook photos, was now first in the entire graduating grade, and the scoreboard said so in chalk nobody could smudge. The quest payouts came in like a slot machine settling its debts. Guys win, chakra plus 1000, and then the gift crit rolled, and I had to find a wall to lean on. Stone breathing, master level. A full-body, total concentration breathing technique from an entirely different universe, the discipline of a stone-wielding slayer from a world of demons and blades, localized by my system into chakra terms without so much as a licensing note, breath control that reinforces flesh and bone until a human body performs like a fortress, and the technical footnote that mattered most, it's stacked with the 8 gates. I stood there running projections on a future guy holding both wand gates open, breath set, that heart, that spine, proc, and felt genuinely sorry for the concept of enemies. My system, it turned out, shopped in other franchises. Fine by me. Genre boundaries never paid my rent. Kaito lost the grade final to his best friend and took it exactly as well as you'd expect, which is to say he demanded the ranking board be checked for errors, twice. His consolation payout came anyway. Great Fire Annihilation. A wall of flame with a Jonin's name on it, and he stood in the emptying gym, second in the grade, former dead last, and declared to Guy, to me, and to the chalkboard personally that the next exam was his. The system spawned the quest before he finished the sentence. My disciples were writing my paychecks with their dreams, and I was cashing every single one. Guy's follow-up gift crit that week delivered the Leaf Dragon God, Konoha's apex taijutsu art, a tornado technique shaped like a rising dragon, at mastery. I now possess the signature move of the village's greatest living taijutsu master, a man I had never met. File that. It becomes relevant, and when it becomes relevant, it becomes hilarious. The office gave me a second Outstanding Teacher Award in the same year, which triggered a small ceremony and a large sulk from Tanaka Hiroki, who calculated that my award bonuses now exceeded his blind date budget. My chakra past 12,000, and the war news got one shade darker every week, like a bruise developing in slow motion. Border skirmishes upgraded to incidents. Incidents upgraded to bulletins. Bulletins upgraded to the Hokage calling me in and asking, without preamble, what the academy could do for the war effort. I was ready. I'd been ready for a month. I pitched a summer training camp, the entire graduating class plus the fresh genin, one intensive holiday program, conditioning, tactics, survival, real drills run by me. Konosuke stroked his beard for the length of one pipe draw, saw a village full of slightly less killable children on the eve of a war, and approved it on the spot. With a promise attached, run the camp well, and the special Jonin promotion goes through. Zaku approved from his own shadow within days, and sent along a case of secret medicine for the students, nutritional supplements, allegedly. I accepted with a smile and inspected every vial like a bomb technician, because gifts from that man arrive with invoices you pay in blood. The medicine tested clean. The gesture still smelled like a farmer feeding livestock. The camp opened on the first morning of summer with over 300 students standing on a training field, one teacher who had monetized education, and one immediate credibility problem. A chunin named Takeru, decent man, reasonable doubts, observed within my hearing that a school teacher maybe should not be running combat training for the village's youth in wartime. I did not argue. Arguing is for people without assets. I called Sora over. My 6-year-old disciple bowed politely to the grown man. Then he dismantled him in front of my entire camp. He closed the distance before Takeru's stance settled. He slipped every counter like water finding a drain. He finished with the blade of one palm resting against a chunin's neck, in less time than it takes to regret a sentence. Kenta watched from the front row wearing the biggest, most vindicated smile of his young life. Questions about my qualifications ended there, permanently, camp-wide, and the system saw 300 students on one field and lost its mind. Large class lectures paid double. A grades dropped 2 techniques at a time. Within the first week, my appraisal upgraded itself. Full skill lists now, with proficiency numbers, every stranger an open book with a price tag, and I confirmed what I'd suspected all spring. I wasn't running a summer camp, I was running a chakra refinery, and the fuel was homework. Camp life produced legends at industrial rates, and the greatest of them wore sunglasses. Sho, a serious, studious boy with a bright future and a tragic destiny, got hold of my first year's chair transformation decoy and identified its fatal flaw. Chairs are not distracting. His improvement was to teach Renzo and Jiro to transform into lightly dressed older girls. The enemy confusion technique, adult edition. It worked. That was the horrifying part. It worked instantly. It worked on everyone, and I could see at a glance that it would keep working until the heat death of chakra itself. And Sho's reputation died in my camp that summer, so a legendary jutsu could be born. He spent the remaining weeks being called the pervert ninja of his generation, while insisting, correctly and uselessly, that he only wrote the theory, and the theory was tactically sound. It was tactically sound. I graded it myself. That never helps. Guy's strength rewards kept localizing techniques from that other pirate-flavored universe, Shigan, a finger strike that punched neat holes in tree trunks, and Shave, a burst step that deleted the space between footsteps. I taught Shave to the disciples and watched the camp's obstacle course records become historical documents. Kaito failed the river sprint stage 16 times, 16, and on the 17th attempt stopped fighting the water, watched how my water dragon moved instead, matched its rhythm, and crossed. He learned Shave that same evening, running on adrenaline and vindication. The dead last was assembling a highlight reel, one refused surrender at a time. 2 more quiet milestones slid into place under the camp noise, and both of them were shaped like keys. Akane's curriculum reached the 5-element seal, real classified tier material now, taught to me over tea because her student had been diligent and her student's tempura had been persuasive. And then, one lesson later, trusting me completely, she taught me the contract seal. Read that again if you know your canon. The contract seal, the technique that severs a summoner's control over the summoned, the exact key that fits the exact species of lock Zaku had installed on my tongue. I mastered it in days and performed weeks of scholarly struggle for the benefit of anyone watching, because the Anbu were always watching. My unsealing project had just gone from theoretical research to a loaded tool in a drawer, and Akane handed it to me between jokes about my knife work. And the war would not stay in the background where I'd filed it. Kumogakure attacked Sunagakure outright, the first open front of the coming storm. The teacher's office read the bulletin in silence over lunch, and I recalculated my clock with cold hands. 4 years had felt generous in spring. By midsummer, it felt like a salesman's estimate. The camp's weekly tournaments became my favorite theater, and week 4 delivered the upset of the summer. Kaito versus Guy, the eternal rivalry, running record heavily green, except this time Kaito didn't charge. He opened at range, seeded the field with shadow clones, let Guy demolish 2 of them with mounting suspicion, and sprang the ambush from the flank with dragonfire at the exact moment Guy committed. Guy hit the ground. The referee called it. Kaito had beaten his monster of a best friend for the first time in his life. He celebrated by raising both fists, announcing that his era had begun, and fainting mid-pose from chakra exhaustion. I carried him off the field like a hero and a sack of rice simultaneously. He woke 20 minutes later, asked whether it had counted, was assured that it counted, and went back to sleep smiling. Then he lost my camp final to Sora the next week and woke up furious about it, which is the correct emotional sequence and also free motivation. The ladder had rungs again, and my ladders need rungs. I also picked up an unofficial 4th student that summer, and the paperwork was filed by a 9-year-old's crush. Kaito dragged Yua into our training circle, partly because she'd asked about medical ninjutsu, mostly because that boy would have dragged a vending machine into the circle if it smiled at him. I looked at the sweet, doomed girl from the single saddest scene in this entire franchise, and I started her that same day on medical chakra and the first foundations of Rika-style strength. Officially, broadening the program. Privately, if the day I dreaded ever came, the mist, the mission, the hand of lightning, the girl at the center of that tragedy would not be a helpless piece on the board. She'd be a medic who counterpunches like a landslide. Every technique I fed her was a crowbar jammed under fate's wheels, and I fed her plenty. The night before the final camp test, I did something I'd been putting off for months. I found out what I was actually worth in a fight. Deep in the forest, alone, no witnesses but trees with poor life expectancy. I opened the first 3 of the 8 gates and layered stone breathing over them. My chakra spiked past 23,000, and my body went bright and hot and terribly light. I threw one punch at the air. The shockwave felled a dozen trees in a fan, cracked and laid out flat, like the forest had decided as a group to lie down. 3 minutes. That was my limit at full stack. And in those 3 minutes, I could kill most elite jonin in this village before they finished being surprised. I stood in the clearing I had personally invented, listening to my heartbeat come down, and took inventory. A year ago, I was cannon fodder with a nice smile. The smile was the only line item that survived. The final test ran in front of the third Hokage himself, plus the assembled faculty, which meant everything that happened on the record. Kiko took the first-year crown and bit no one and looked to me for approval, growth on every axis. My youngest folded Takeru again in the exhibition match, gently, for old time's sake, while the teachers section performed disbelief in unison. Then Kaito beat Kenta in a genuinely good bracket match, and Konosuke, watching his son lose, offered my winner a warm compliment about having 100 ways to win, and offered his own boy nothing at all. I watched the crack open in Kenta from 30 meters away. I'd be patching that one later. That man could govern a village and could not compliment his own child at gunpoint. And Renzo and Jiro, in front of the god of shinobi, the professor of 1,000 jutsu, the leader of the village's entire military, deployed the adult enemy confusion technique. 2 9-year-olds vanished in smoke and reappeared as a bouquet of lightly dressed older girls, mid-pose. I watched the strongest man in the village experience a full system stagger, one visible heartbeat of pipe-frozen paralysis, before 6 decades of discipline slammed the vault shut. Every teacher present silently and unanimously agreed that nothing had occurred. The boys received scores. History received a technique. Sho, watching from the stands, aged 4 years. When the dust settled, Konosuke stood, gathered the camp with a look, and promoted me to special jonin on the spot, in front of 300 students and the whole faculty, which was the point. The old man gives no gift without an audience, because audiences are how gifts become armor. Camp rewards rolled in on top. Chakra past 15,000. Scrolls. Combination ninjutsu theory for stacking techniques into each other. A very good day professionally. Then the students ruined me. I walked back onto the main field to dismiss the camp, and there was a cake. 5 tiers. Comically, structurally unwise. Blazing with 359 candles. One for every student enrolled, and a bundle of 18 kunai planted on top like the world's most dangerous birthday sparklers. It was my 18th birthday. I had told no one. They had counted, planned, pooled allowances, delegated, and kept a secret. 300 children kept a secret, which violates several laws of nature, to ambush their teacher with fire and sugar. Kiko led the singing, off-key and at volume. Sora stood near the front, not quite crying. Kaito had clearly been in charge of candles and clearly considered fire safety optional. And I stood there with the smoke stinging my eyes, and for one unguarded minute, I stopped being a system farmer, a sleeper agent, a man with a countdown clock. This world is a military meat grinder wearing a village costume. That assessment stands. I will die holding that assessment. And it is also this, a field of small idiots singing at their teacher because he taught them to throw a punch and believed they were worth teaching. I made a quiet promise over those candles, the kind you don't say out loud because saying it out loud makes it a performance. When I got strong enough, really strong enough, I was going to make this world a little less cruel to people like them. Then I ate cake, because promises work better with cake. The promotion came with a bonus round I'd been engineering all year, the custody battle. Konosuke walked into a meeting with Zaku carrying receipts, documented proof that Root had illegally trained 5 agents, 3 of them descendants of war heroes, which, in Konoha's politics, is grabbing the third rail with both hands and asking for a stool. The price of the Hokage's silence about the other 4. One specific asset, me. Zaku, quartered in the only currency he respects, agreed, and then summoned me for the single most passive-aggressive farewell in the history of espionage. He released me from Root with the warmth of a man donating a kidney at knife point. He presented parting gifts, a fire release scroll, a case of elixirs, the way you'd tip a waiter you intend to have deported. And at the door, in that dry, embalmed voice, he added, "Await my summons." Translation: the paperwork says you're free. The leash is just longer now. You are still my sleeper, and someday, I will pull. The seal came off in the Hokage's office. Formal procedure, witnesses, Zaku standing in the corner cold as a crypt while the cursed tongue eradication seal was released, then sweeping out without one word. I ran my tongue over my own teeth, and, for the first time since I opened my eyes in that classroom, every word in my head belonged to me. Konosuke, warm and grandfatherly, spent the next 10 minutes binding me with gratitude instead. A nicer material, but I priced it as a leash all the same, because I price everything. And that very evening, a courier scroll arrived from Zaku. Several paragraphs, personally brushed, explaining that his years of coldness had been for my own strengthening, that hard soil grows hard roots, that he had always believed in me. A masterpiece of abuser logic. I read it twice out of professional admiration for the craftsmanship, filed it mentally under kindling, and burned it in the stove while dinner cooked. The pork came out excellent. Spite is an underrated seasoning. Free on paper, marked in practice. I kept drilling the contract seal anyway, nightly, until the hand movements lived below thought. Insurance is a habit, not an event. The new term opened with my curriculum reforms live. Combined lecture halls, 4 classes at a time, the reward pipeline running double wide. I taught the big halls with a shadow clone while my real body trained or researched, the closest thing to legal time theft this world offers, and I ran it like a factory shift. Kaito learned the shadow clone technique himself around then, and immediately discovered its one catastrophic design flaw. His clone had his personality. First evening, he sat the clone down at his desk, pushed the homework across, and issued instructions. The clone looked at the worksheet. The clone looked at Kaito. The clone said, with Kaito's own face and Kaito's own voice, "Absolutely not." And the negotiation collapsed into a scuffle that was technically a boy fighting himself over fractions and losing. He came to me the next day demanding to know why the second Hokage had designed the jutsu with a loyalty bug. I explained, the clone knows everything you know, including how much you don't want to do the homework. He called it the worst technique in Konoha. Hold that thought for later, because it gets a payoff. Then the war stopped being a weather report. Iwagakure declared war on Konoha. Formal, official, armies moving. Weeks later, Kumogakure declared as well. 2 fronts, 1 village, and a Jonin meeting roster that now included 1 schoolteacher, sitting quietly in the back, appraising the room. The Hyuga brothers, side by side. Clan heads like Isamu, a solid S+ on my screen, tight as a wound spring. Hiroshi at the map table, sketching border logistics with the weary competence of a man who has already fought the whole war in his head and is annoyed reality is behind schedule. The village recalibrated itself from home into arsenal, and everyone's children got a little more valuable and a little more expendable in the same motion. My answer to the war was the same as my answer to everything. Teach faster. I put the disciples on breathing techniques, the full-body, total concentration disciplines from that other world. Flame breathing for Sora and Kaito, stone for Guy. And progress was 0, 0, 0, and 0 for weeks. Breathing techniques are the hardest thing I teach. No hand signs, no shortcuts, just the slow rewiring of lungs and blood and attention. The boys strained until they saw spots and moved the needle nothing. Then Kaito broke through, and the way he did it told me more about this world's rules than any scroll. He stopped mid-training run to carry an old woman's groceries because he is Kaito, because helping grandmothers is written in his marrow deeper than any jutsu, and it cost him 20 minutes and he jogged back apologizing. That evening, his flame-breathing proficiency jumped double digits in 1 session. I checked the numbers twice. The technique fed on who he was, not how hard he strained. A breath discipline about warmth, unlocking for a boy whose default setting is warm. Sora, 6 years old and empirical to the bone, trailed Kaito for 3 days to figure out the discrepancy, watched him help strangers, feed strays, greet every shopkeeper by name, and came back to me with his findings and a changed expression. The lesson he took wasn't about breathing. It would define him better than any Sharingan ever would. Exam season again, and by now the school had learned to buy tickets early. Guy took Hyuga Ryo apart in 2 kicks. The wall from last year now a speed bump with a nice haircut. And the grade final gave the term its main event. Kaito versus Guy. Flame breathing against stone breathing. 2 of my kids burning my curriculum against each other in front of the whole school. Fire flowed, stone held, and fire found the seam. Kaito won. Grade first place. The official dead last of this generation was now, on paper and in public and in chalk, its number 1. The quest chime rang, chakra flowed, flame breathing stamped itself to master in my skull. And the school spent a week rewriting its own mythology, because the 2 names at the top of the graduating class were the 2 names every teacher had once used as cautionary tales. The Haruno noticed. Of course they noticed. The clan tracks its bloodline stock prices like a trading floor. Elder Renjiro appeared at Kaito's grandmother's door with congratulation gifts and a police force recruitment pamphlet warm as a contract. Isamu himself, the clan head, a man whose free time is measured in single minutes, paid a personal visit to Sora with an offer of early graduation into clan-sponsored training. We declined politely, citing the boys' need for a proper foundation, and the clan withdrew smiling, and I smiled back, and everyone at that table was holding cards under it. I needed Sora in my classroom and out of the clan's pressure cooker for every year I could buy. The life mission on my quest log agreed. And then, one market afternoon, the running gag about Guy's family stopped being a gag. And I want to slow down here, because this one earned it. 2 Chunin were entertaining themselves at a market stall, and their entertainment was Spirit Hayato, the eternal Genin, my village's official joke, doing his grocery shopping in that indestructible green optimism. They imitated his poses, they speculated, loudly, about whether failure is hereditary. Guy heard the last part. He fought them, both of them, grown Chunin, right there between the vegetable stalls. And he lost. Of course he lost. The gap was years and rank wide. But he got up, and lost, and got up. His nose bleeding, his knuckles split, this 9-year-old kept standing back up between 2 grown men with that terrible bright stubbornness, and the crowd watched. And the Chunin's grins got uglier, and somewhere around the 5th knockdown, at the exact edge of breaking, Guy's lungs found it. The rhythm. The one I drilled into him for months with 0 result. Stone breathing ignited for the first time in his life, and the talentless, humiliated, bleeding little boy one-shotted both Chunin into the dirt for his father's name. 1 blow each. Market silence. My other student happened to witness the whole thing from the street. Ren didn't say a word, just walked over, took Guy's arm across his shoulders, and carried him home on his back, very quiet, doing long division about effort and talent that his own father's ghost makes complicated for him. I did not laugh at any part of that one, and I'm not making it funnier now. Some scenes you stand back from and let them be what they are. The 2 Chunin, once they'd been picked up, were made to deliver a formal apology to Hayato in public. I may have assisted the administrative process. The administrative process needed very little assistance once the story got around. Autumn brought a birthday I'd been planning like a heist, because in October I learned something that reorganized my priorities. Sora mentioned, flat, matter of fact, the way orphans say devastating things, that birthdays were just the day you turn 1 year older. No party, no cake. Nobody's ever thrown him one. He said it the way you'd report the weather and went back to his footwork. So I built him one, decorated my house with the whole crew sworn to secrecy, a vow Kaito survived by biting his own sleeve for a week. Baked. Cook the menu of a boy who thinks he doesn't have favorite foods and is wrong. And when the noise peaked and the cake was down to crumbs, I handed him a long, narrow box. Inside was a short blade I had forged myself. Weeks of burned fingers and ruined steel behind it. I'd learned smithing from nothing for this, with his name engraved down the spine in chakra silver. Sora. A weapon made by one specific pair of hands for one specific boy. He read his own name on the steel, and this 6-year-old prodigy, this child who dismantles Chunin without raising his heart rate, burst into tears and hugged me around the ribs and could not stop. So I stood in my own kitchen with a crying Haruno attached to me, patting his head, and I was exactly as calm as I was pretending to be. Which was not very. My system went off like a jackpot siren. Trust level 4, the deepest tier it tracks, the one where the child files you under family. The gift crit rolled so hard it dropped thunder breathing at perfect into my head, plus a physical artifact, a pair of black-framed glasses that hide what my eyes are doing. And then the emotion itself finished the job. Joy that sharp, that pure, flipped the ancient switch in Haruno blood, and my disciple's eyes bloomed red through the tears. Sharingan. Awakened not by grief, not by battlefield trauma, not by watching something die, by a birthday present. Somewhere in the clan archives, the tragic awakening tradition filed a formal complaint. I framed the moment in my memory instead. Proof, written in his own eyes, that this world's most famous curse also answers to happiness. That fact was going in my toolbox next to everything else. The system paid out for the awakening too, and the payout redefined my ceiling. Byakugan, an actual Byakugan, installed in my skull behind the new concealment glasses. Vision in a full circle, vision through walls, telescopic range. Layered with perfect thunder breathing, it produced something the blade masters of that other world called the transparent world. I could read muscle, breath, and intent off a moving body like sheet music. I tested the package in the forest that night, tracked a moth's heartbeat at 40 meters, moved faster than my own shave, dodged thrown rocks with my back turned, and stood there in the dark in my new glasses, grinning like a fool with 2 bloodline limits and a library card. But the real payload was the message that unfolded after the party, when the house was quiet and the dishes were done. Life mission unlocked, Haruno and Konoha. Resolve the conflict between clan and village. Integrate the Haruno into Konoha for good. Failure condition, the clan is massacred. The massacre. The system had looked me in the eye and put the genocide on my quest log, with a fail state and a timer I couldn't see. Not a suggestion, an assignment, co-signed by the universe, with the boy who cried over a birthday knife standing at the center of it. I accepted before the screen finished rendering. Some quests you take for the loot. This one, the loot was a world where Sora gets to grow old. The glasses, by the way, became a whole thing at work. I wore them everywhere now. Had to, with a stolen bloodline running behind the lenses, and the village decided Konoha's gentle young teacher had upgraded to Konoha's gentle young intellectual. Students said they suited me. Colleagues said they suited me. Saito Takeshi asked if I was cultivating a distinguished image. I was cultivating a place to hide an X-ray war crime in the middle of my face, Takeshi, but thank you, they do bring out my cheekbones. My newly crowned grade first marched off that same season to cash his ranking in for the thing he actually wanted, a real match with Ren. Formal challenge, witnesses, the works. And it went beautifully for most of its length. He fought genuinely well, fire on rails, footwork that used to be a rumor, pressure that had my other disciple working for once. And then Ren baited him with a shadow clone, materialized behind him, pressed his fingers together in the seal of the tiger, and delivered the 1,000 years of death. If you don't know the technique, I am not describing it. If you do know it, you understand why my student refused to sit down for an entire day and referred to the match only as the incident. But under the slapstick, something real moved. Ren walked away from that fight quiet. The dead last he remembered was extinct, and something fast and fire-breathing and dangerous had replaced him. And I had built it in my backyard. The system spawned Kaito's next quest before the bruise faded, defeat Ren. The latter had a new rung, and both boys were now climbing toward each other. Winter brought structural changes with my fingerprints on them. The internship plan I'd pitched, pairing top students with real low-rank missions before graduation, came back from the Hokage's office approved and expanded because the war was hungry and the village wanted its children pre-seasoned. Squads were drawn up, and my own intern squad's roster arrived with a third name added in the Hokage's personal hand, under a request folded inside the request. Ren. Here's what the father, Hisashi Kida, the White Fang, the legend who outshone the Sannin, who abandoned a critical mission to save his teammates, and whom this grateful village then vilified so thoroughly, including the very comrades he saved, that he opened his own stomach in the family living room. Ren found the body. Since then, the boy had rebuilt himself around one commandment. The mission comes first. Comrades are expendable. Feelings are malfunction. Delivered in a voice with all the warmth of a filing cabinet. His last teammates were dead. His last mentor had quit. No squad in my village wanted him. The Hokage handed me the most broken child in the village and said, in the politest administrative phrasing available, "Fix him." Ren and Kaido lasted about 4 minutes in the same training ground before detonating. Ren observed, clinically, that teammates who die executing a mission are an acceptable cost of completion. Kaido swung at him with tears already standing in his eyes, because Kaido's entire soul is a rejection of that sentence. Yua refereed the aftermath with the weary skill of a girl who could see both boys clearly. Great start. Wonderful chemistry. I scheduled the bell test for that weekend. You know the bell test. Everyone knows the bell test. It's practically a family heirloom in this franchise, and I was frankly honored to be running it a generation early. Bells on my belt, steal them by any means. Lunch for winners. The real answer, as always, you cannot do it alone. They came at me solo, one by one, and I swatted them like flies at a picnic. Guy charged, magnificent, doomed. Kaito tried fire and angles, better, still doomed. Ren hung back, analyzed, and executed a genuinely elegant shadow clone gambit, which I countered with a more elegant one, because son, I invented my clone rotation grading 200 essays a night. You are bringing a knife to a bureaucracy fight. Then the moment the whole test exists for, Guy went down hard and lay there winded, my clone closing in, and Ren, mission first, comrades expendable Ren, hesitated. One visible heartbeat of hesitation, the commandment grinding against something older in him. And in that heartbeat, Kaito and Guy did not hesitate at all. Kaito hauled Guy up under fire, Guy shielded Kaito's blindside the second he could stand, and the two of them dragged Ren bodily into a three-man play by simply behaving as if he were already part of it. The three of them came at me as a unit, staggered angles, fire hurting me onto Guy's line, Ren timing the gap, and took the bells I was suddenly, genuinely pleased to let go. Nobody converts in one afternoon. Filing cabinets don't become boys again over lunch. But a crack is a crack, and through it, that evening, Ren asked, casually, sideways, as if the answer didn't matter, whether the squad trained together every day or only for tests. Every day, I said. He nodded and looked away and pretended to check his kunai. Filing cabinets have tells too. Then came the D-rank era, which is this world's sacred hazing ritual. Lost cats, groceries, fences, repeat. My squad turned cat-catching into a blood sport, and the standings revealed the funniest intelligence asset in the land of fire. My student won 3 rounds straight, not with the Sharingan he didn't have yet, not with speed, with grandmothers. Every old lady he had ever helped across the street, every heavy bag he had ever carried, was now a node in his personal information network, and the grandmothers of my village fed him cat sightings like a state intelligence agency. Location, direction, mood of the cat. Mood of the cat. Ren, elite chunin, prodigy of his generation, was losing a professional competition to a boy powered by grandmas, and it was eating him alive. So he did the Ren thing. He tailed Kaito, mapped the network's key nodes, and flipped several load-bearing grandmothers with polite greetings, correct bowing, and heavy lifting performed with tragic diligence. Next round went to Ren. Espionage. Counter-espionage. Cats. The Hokage read my mission reports with his pipe going and granted us C-rank access, possibly on humanitarian grounds. The cats had suffered enough. Somewhere in those weeks, Ren's file in my system changed status. He'd started staying after drills, asking real questions, training questions first, then, in lower light, other kinds. Eating at my table with the mask actually down when the others weren't looking. The system logged it formally. Disciple, slot 4 of 4. Trust climbing. And the moment the 4th slot filled with a 4th S potential child, the whole interface leveled up around me. A system shop unlocked, elixirs, consumables, purchasable with accumulated points. My professor skill upgraded a tier, and the welcome crit for Ren's discipleship dropped a technique called Purple Lightning, a raw, ozone-stinking evolution of lightning release that, in the timeline I remembered, an adult Ren invents for himself 30 years from now, after losing the Sharingan. I taught it to him early. Tailor the drills to his chakra like of the spoke suit. Let him believe I designed it for him personally, which, in every way that will ever matter to him, I had. The evening it first crackled violet in his palm. He stared at it, then at me, with an expression I am going to keep in the same drawer as Sora's birthday tears. Full roster, 4 disciples, 1 honorary, 1 classroom of the most dangerous children in recorded history. Every one of them convinced their teacher was a nice young man in glasses. The nice young man in glasses, meanwhile, was about to be needed at full volume, because the war had finally decided to introduce itself to my students personally. First real C rank. Escort a merchant family to the land of rice fields. A milk run. Walk, guard, deliver, collect. We were 2 days out when my sensory net snagged something with the wrong shape. 8 signatures moving to intercept, arranged like professionals, and the forehead protectors, when they broke cover, said Iwagakure. Said, past tense on purpose, because everything else about them said Kumogakure, the techniques, the formation, and above all the anchor, a broad man whose thrown shuriken curved mid-air like they had opinions. Magnet release. Jome, an elite of the hidden cloud. 20,000 chakra on my screen, wearing another village's symbol, a false flag squad sent to butcher a Konoha client convoy in Iwagakure costume and pour gasoline on someone else's war. They opened hard, and they opened smart. The 6 Chunin split my kids from the clients. The enemy Jonin pressed Kaito, and Jomei took Ren, magnetized his weapons, his wire, everything metal on a boy who fighters with metal, and pinned him like a butterfly. I watched, through the transparent world, my mission first disciple stop struggling, square his shoulders under the descending blade, and get ready to die correctly, by the book, without troubling anyone. No, absolutely not. I did not spend a year fixing that child's sleep schedule for this. I stopped hiding. A wind blade crossed 40 meters and broke the executioner's arm off its arc. Then I moved the way I train and never show. Thunder-breathing pace, glasses flashing, and put false darkness through the ambush line. Spears of lightning, 1, 2, 3 Chunin down in a single exchange, the survivors' formation folding around the holes. Their Jonin called a regroup. Wise. Useless. I stacked the 2 techniques the system had paid me across the year, Zukoku's roaring fire hunger and a wind amplifier behind it, and rolled a sea of fire down the road that ate the ambush, the tree line, and the concept of retreat in one breath. Jomei came at me through the smoke, magnet field grasping for my gear, and found that my gear does not matter. I met him with a Shigan wrapped in lightning, one finger, black-coated, driven through his guard and through him. He died believing the Third Raikage's hell stab had somehow found him out here, which suited me perfectly, and I burned what remained past autopsy. Let the coroners write fan fiction. My actual technique list stays out of every archive in every nation. Thank you. 8 attackers, 0 survivors relevant to my secrets. The client family spent the rest of the journey looking at me like a portable shrine and tipping in reverence. Kaito had held an enemy Chunin alone, shaking, scorched, and brave past his own understanding, and would tell the story for the rest of the year with the casualty count intact and the shaking edited out. And Ren stood in the ash, doing arithmetic aloud, very softly, mask hiding everything but the math. That fire, that speed. Is sensei stronger than the Sannin? I patted his head and declined to enter a number. A teacher maintains some mystery. Also, I genuinely wasn't sure yet, and that uncertainty was the most exciting thing that had happened to me all year. Back home, I filed an edited report, 1 Jonin, some Chunin, aggressive weather, and watched Konosuke read between every line I'd left him. The mission upgraded to A rank on the spot, 800,000 Ryo, plus a very focused conversation about false flags, because I'd handed the old man proof that someone was trying to escalate his war on a discount. The disciples' growth payout came through the system that night, fat with survived combat multipliers, and Kaito and Ren, who had conducted a screaming tactical argument in the middle of the engagement, received 100 punishment laps, which they ran in perfectly synchronized fury, side by side, silently hating me together. Team building. I invoice it as team building. The debrief week rolled into the season of gifts and consequences. My battle review sessions became the squad's favorite ritual. Every fight replayed on a chalkboard, every mistake priced, every good call praised by name. After one of them, Ren lingered, and I taught him the full purple lightning progression. The calligraphy piece he gave me in thanks crit my system for an Earth-Nature upgrade. The economy of gratitude humming along. And then I planned Guy's birthday, and for Guy, I planned the one gift money cannot forge. I decided to get his father promoted. Understand the full setup, because I did the arithmetic on it for a week. Spirit Hayato had been a genin for decades, the eternal genin, a grown man running D ranks alongside 12-year-olds, the standing punchline of 2 generations, a man my village had turned into shorthand for failure. And that same punchline had privately mastered the 8 inner gates deeper than nearly anyone alive, and had never once complained about the joke, because complaining would have taken time away from being proud of his son. So I walked into the Hokage's office and made a pitch. The 8 gates was the second Hokage's dream project, a technique developed for an elite assault squad that never materialized, shelved as too dangerous, too costly. The village was sitting on its greatest living practitioner and using him as a mailman. Konosuke raised an eyebrow at his schoolteacher lobbying for personnel reform and asked for a demonstration. Hayato stood in a training field the next week, in front of the god of shinobi, and opened 6 gates. The air went red, the ground complained. A shadow clone of the Hokage tested him personally and returned with its robes singed and its report glowing. Special promotion. Chunin. On merit. Witnessed. Sealed. They told Guy at his birthday party, in my house, between the gift jumpsuits and Yua's hand-drawn portraits. Hayato put his hands on his son's shoulders and said the sentence he had waited a lifetime to say. No one can call your father an eternal genin anymore. Then the 2 of them detonated. Tears, forearms gripped, howling about youth and sunsets at a volume that violated several municipal ordinances, with a sunset practically visible behind them through sheer emotional force. I stood by the food table with something in my eye. Say nothing. Because here is the ledger under that scene. In the timeline I remembered, the village only learns to respect Spirit Hayato after he is Ash, after he opens the final gate against 7 swordsmen and dies so his son can live, and everyone spends the funeral discovering he was a hero. I moved the respect up the schedule to a version of events where he gets to be alive for it. A boy who once bled in a market for his father's name got to watch that name repaired in daylight. Of everything I farmed, built, and stole this year, That one might be the line item I'm proudest of. The system, which sees everything, agreed. Guy, trust level 4, family tier. And the crit that rolled off his gratitude was the most absurd cross-franchise localization yet. Armament hockey, perfect level. If you know it from its home universe of pirates and sea kings, the armor of pure will, hardening the body lacquer black, letting flesh punch through defenses that laugh at ordinary technique. My system had translated it into chakra terms as an advanced yin release discipline and stamped it perfect. I tested it that night in the deep forest, blackened forearm shrugging off my own jutsu, a black-coated chidori that went through a boulder like an opinion through a committee, and concluded, with real affection, that my system had stopped pretending genre boundaries exist. Fine by me. Genre boundaries never once paid my rent. I started teaching hockey fundamentals to all 4 disciples that same month. Progress was glacial for the 3 with ninjutsu talent, and geological for Guy, whose relationship with anything chakra-shaped remained a tragic, long-distance romance. But the seeds went in, and I am a patient farmer with a war for a deadline. Akane's SEAL curriculum reached the 4 symbols ceiling that winter. Top shelf conventional fuinjutsu, the tier villages classify, and clans hoard. She taught it beaming, hands on hips, declaring that her students' progress reflected gloriously on Konoha's #1 sealing mistress, and she had no idea she was arming that student against the village's own shadow department. I almost mastered it over 2 lessons at my public pace, having actually mastered it in 1 evening at my real one. Every seal she taught me was another pick in a lock Zaku still believed he owned the only key to. February brought Kaito's birthday, and I fired up the forge again, a kunai this time, dragon pattern down the blade, engraved, balanced for his exact grip. He unwrapped it, went silent for a full 3 seconds, which for Kaito is a coma, and then held it overhead like a sacred relic while declaring it too cool to ever actually throw. The system's physical reward tier answered his joy with something I had to lean against a wall to process. A staff. Long dark gold, wrong to look at directly. The 6-path staff, or this system's replica of the weapon class associated with the literal ancestor of all chakra. I stored it so deep in my sealed inventory that my own shadow clones would need a map and a permission slip, and Kaito's screen unfolded the words I've been waiting for since the day I appraised a drooling boy in goggles. Life mission unlocked. Hokage. Help Haruno Kaito become Hokage of the Hidden Leaf. 2 life missions on my panel now. Save the Haruno, crown Kaito. And if you squint, they are the same mission from 2 angles. Break the timeline where my village eats its best children, and put the boy fate picked as its main course on top of the mountain instead, wearing the hat. I looked at the sleeping quest tracker, sitting at a rounding error above 0%, and mentally shook hands with it. Long game. My favorite kind. Ren's turn came at night, the way his problems always did. He stopped sleeping. I caught it in his footwork first, a half-beat of lag that had no business in that body, then in the shadows stacking under his eyes. When I pressed, gently, after the others had gone, the crack opened. His father. The White Fang. The mission Hisashi abandoned to save his comrades. The village that spat on him for it, including the comrades. In the living room floor, where an 8-year-old found what was left. Ren had survived it by ruling. The village was right, his father was wrong. Warmth is a malfunction. Now he trained every day beside teammates who dove in front of blades for each other, under a teacher who rewarded it, and the ruling was breaking. And it was breaking his sleep with it, because some appeals only get filed at 3 in the morning. So I took him home, made tea, and dismantled the verdict brick by brick, in order. Your father saved his comrades, and his comrades lived. That is not a failed ninja. That is a qualified one, the most qualified kind there is. The mission he dropped cost the village money. The men he saved raised children. Run the ledger honestly and tell me who profited. The village that mocked him was frightened and small, and crowds are cowards with extra steps. You've seen how they treated Guy's father, and you've seen how wrong they were, and you carried Guy home yourself that day, so you already know the crowd's judgment is worth exactly nothing. And then the sentence I'd been saving, the one his own future self will someday give away as if it were his. The mission matters, and your comrades matter, and when the two collide, uphold your own ninja way. He sat with his mask down and his tea going cold, and cried, the way boys cry when they finally get permission. Silently. Furiously, leaking around a clenched jaw. I refilled the tea and said nothing else, because the medicine was already in. In the morning, I built him a breakfast heavy enough to qualify as therapy. Grilled fish, rice, tamagoyaki, soup, the works, and the kid who ate 3 helpings of it slept that night for the first time in weeks. He never thanked me for the conversation in words. He started showing up early to help set up drills instead, which, from Ren, is a sonnet. I did the year's real accounting that night, privately, over the dishes. 4 disciples, 4 fates I was actively falsifying. The system paid me in chakra and jutsu and cross-dimensional contraband, but somewhere along the months, the ledger had quietly flipped. I was no longer teaching them to farm rewards. I was farming rewards to be strong enough to keep them. Mission 4 introduced me to the future, and the future had biceps. Bandit subjugation, routine on paper, a nest of road thieves with delusions of organization. The bandits lasted 20 minutes against my squad and would not be discussed further, except that my sensory net, sweeping wide out of habit, caught something else moving through the region. A Kumogakure formation, tight and fast, anchored by a chakra signature the size of a weather system. I stashed the kids with orders and a code word, changed my face and colors with a transformation, and went to look, because intelligence about monsters is cheapest when the monster doesn't know it's being priced. Their leader was a mountain of a young man wearing lightning like a coat, and I knew the face before my appraisal finished loading. Jin. Raikage candidate, heir to the hidden cloud, the fastest fist in the land of lightning, a man whose diplomatic doctrine is best described as forward. Beside him, a younger presence with blades and braids, Venom Ryu, years before his tailed beast, already moving like a rumor. They made me, a lone masked stranger reeking of falsified allegiance, was never walking away unquestioned. And Jin's idea of questioning is a lightning chakra mode charge. So we fought. I gave him a fake name, Kenji, because if you're going to lie, lie with theater. And then I gave him a genuinely bad evening. Thunder breathing at full mark, transparent world reading the seams in his lightning armor, and one blackened armament fist delivered into those seams with everything my stacked disciplines could feed it. I call the move the serious punch, privately. And the joke is for my own amusement, but the impact was not a joke. It cracked his armor and hurt him, actually hurt him. The future Fourth Raikage disengaged with the expression of a man adding a mysterious stranger to a very short and very intense list, and I ghosted before the list acquired an address. What I bought with that fight was calibration, the exact width of the gap between me and the top of this world's food chain. Narrower than last year, still real. I logged it and went back for the kids, and found the kids mid-graduation, the real kind. A Kumogakure Jonin named Logan, a veteran, detached from Jin's group and genuinely dangerous, had cornered the three of them while I was away pricing his boss. Ren went down early, wounded, bleeding into the dirt, and Kaito, who had room to run and every school-certified reason to take it, planted himself between the blade and his teammate instead. The dead last, standing his ground over the prodigy who used to mock him, refusing, and the refusal detonated something ancient in his blood. Two Tomo spun up in each eye. Sharingan, awakened not by watching someone die, but by refusing to let it happen. That's my student. That's the difference. And I will accept partial credit. With my student's new eyes reading Logan's rhythm and calling angles out loud, Ren dragged himself up and improvised, channeled his lightning nature down the white fang blade into a flash step strike he invented in the space between two heartbeats. It went through the Jonin, kill confirmed. He would later name the move Thunderclap Flash, with the studied casualness of a boy who absolutely did not practice saying it into my mirror. I arrived to a dead enemy Jonin, a bleeding, grinning squad, and a two Tomoe Sharingan blinking at me over Ren's shoulder. The village spent the following month repeating the genius Ren is back, and only my squad knew the genius had been rebuilt from parts in a school teacher's backyard, and that the backyard's other alumnus now had copy wheel eyes and a winning streak. Kaito hit trust level 4 that week, family tier, full house, Sora, Guy, Kaito, and Ren climbing. And then, in a formal spar with witnesses and stakes, Kaito beat Ren. Clean, no asterisks, Sharingan reading lightning, fire answering steel, the quest that had been open since the 1,000 years of death closing with a chime like a struck bell. He stood there heaving, red-eyed, wearing the biggest grin in the land of fire, while Ren, savor this, demanded a rematch. Demanded, with feeling. Rivals now. Equals now. The saddest broken friendship in this entire canon, running a year early as a functioning one, and I got paid chakra for it. Sometimes the system and I want exactly the same thing. Then the Academy posted term mission statistics and the building briefly stopped working. My intern squad's public file listed 2 A ranks and 1 B rank. Interns, children technically still enrolled, had a mission sheet most Chunin would frame. Teachers gathered at the notice board like it owed them money. Saito Takeshi read it 3 times and sat down carefully. In the middle of the commotion, Sora hit a wall of his own. His breathing progress stalled, and the perfectionist in him began quietly eating itself over it. I handled it with a technique from my previous life's toolbox. I talked him through it at bedtime, unhurried, until the knot loosened, and the breakthrough arrived in his sleep like a delivery. Some students you push, some you tuck in. Knowing which is the entire job. Mission 5 was supposed to be a grocery run. I want that on the record. C rank, wartime classification. Escort a food convoy to my village's front camp in the land of grass. Konosuke approved it personally, mostly because my student begged with the shameless persistence of a boy who wants to see the world and has no idea what the world does to people. Ren, whose forecasting curse my whole squad knew by then, got goaded into predicting the mission and, a scholar to the end, chose reason over pattern recognition and called it a routine delivery. We arrived at the front camp exactly in time for Iwagakure's answer to everything, a full surprise offensive. Thousands of ninja coming out of the morning like weather, and at the spearhead, 2 signatures that made my appraisal politely clear its throat. Goro of the 4 Tails, lava-blooded, veteran, 3.25 million chakra. June of the 5 Tails, a steam-armored tower, 3.65 million. 2-tailed beasts in human packaging, walking at a camp full of people I knew, on a morning my students were present. So the school teacher went to war in front of everyone, and the mask came all the way off. The public layers of it anyway. I always keep one. The opening exchange, I killed an Iwagakure Jonin fast enough that the Konoha ninja around me stopped mid-motion to double-check what they'd seen. Then their explosion corps sent the ace, Gari, the explosion release elite, whose name the front had learned to whisper, a man who'd been dismantling Konoha squads for weeks, whose fists detonate what they touch, and whose taijutsu makes sure they touch. He came at me through his own blast wave, grinning. I answered with the combination I'd been assembling all year like a savings bond. Zukoku's roaring fire hunger, wind amplification stacked behind it, combination ninjutsu theory braiding the streams, and the field between us became a rolling sea of flame, orange to white, eating the air. Gari met the wave with everything explosion release argues, and lost the argument. He left the battle somewhere on the spectrum between alive and cautionary tale, carried by subordinates, and the explosion corps' morale left with him. Around me, Konoha ninja were pointing, and the sentence they kept repeating had a familiar shape. Golden, smiling, devastating, he looks like Daiki. Wonderful. A year of careful anonymity, and my legend debuts as a cover version. My disciples, meanwhile, fought their own war at the camp's edge, and won it like a thesis defense. An Iwagakure Jonin picked the 3 smallest silhouettes on the field, on the reasonable theory that children are the soft target. Over 4 coordinated minutes, he learned that these particular children were a 2-tomoe Sharingan, calling his trajectories in real time, a stone-breathing battering ram who doesn't acknowledge pain as a genre, and a lightning-fast swordsman running the kill plan like a metronome. Kaito blinded the angles, Guy broke the stance, Ren finished the sentence. A wartime Jonin, killed by 3 children I taught to hold chopsticks correctly. I have never filled out an incident report with more complicated pride. And above all of it, the top tier of this world put on its show. Gamma, frontline commander, and up to this week a man I knew mostly as a rumor with hair, went sage mode with 2 elder toads on his shoulders and met a jinchuriki head-on, trading blows with a tailed beast vessel like it was a sparring Tuesday. Daiki moved like punctuation, flying thunder god flickering him across the battlefield between heartbeats. And when the 2 beasts charged their tailed beast balls and fired, twice, 2 suns compressed to points and thrown, Daiki caught entire squads out of the blast radius both times, teleporting clusters of grown ninja like a stage magician with a grudge against death. The craters where our people had been standing smoked politely. Our people, elsewhere, kept breathing. The jinchuriki, bruised and behind's resilience, withdrew. My camp erupted, great victory, banners, tears, names being memorized for the histories. I stood in the cheering with a festival face on and ran colder numbers underneath. Iwagakure had thrown 2 jinchuriki at a supply line and pulled them out on a timetable, intact. That is not how you spend your aces. That is how you spend your aces when the man behind them, Juro, the Tsuchikage, 300 years of cunning and a bad back, wants every village on the continent to underestimate exactly how much army he has left in the mountain. I filed the thought where I file all my monsters, labeled, dated, waiting. Victory night at a war camp runs on 2 fuels, and since alcohol was rationed, I supplied the other one. I cooked for the front line. Big pots, local ingredients, chef skill fully weaponized. Battle-hardened ninja took 1 bite and openly asked whether the enemy had launched a genjutsu attack. A second bite settled the question in favor of seconds. Gamma laughed his enormous laugh and informed the line that they were lucky. This was Maeda's personal cooking. Daiki said nothing, because Daiki had eaten 2 bowls of rice in the time it took Gamma to say the sentence, and was quietly relocating dishes toward himself with the focus of a man reunited with a lost love. Then Gamma learned about the camera. Kaito had brought one on the mission. Of course he had, and I suggested a few photos of Daiki for Akane back home. Simple, sweet idea. Except Daiki, instructed to look natural, produced the smile of a hostage in a proof-of-life photograph. Mouth corners mechanically hoisted, eyes pleading for extraction. Kaito lowered the camera and asked, with genuine concern, why he wasn't smiling like he usually did. Daiki tried harder. It got worse. Gamma laughed himself horizontal, seized the camera, and personally documented the entire catastrophe frame by frame. And Kaito, grumbling that the white-haired uncle was cruel, quietly snapped the one real smile Daiki dropped when nobody was posing him. Good instincts, that boy. In every category that does not involve written tests. Then my student picked a fight with a Sannin, verbally. Gamma teased him about his size. Kaito countered with his mission record, 2 A ranks and a battlefield rescue, thank you very much. Gamma escalated to 20+ S ranks and his full title, the Toad Sage of Mount Myoboku. And my student reviewed the evidence and rejected the sage part on definitional grounds. A real sage, he ruled, needs unique powers, like the 6-path sage, or the sages Gamao and Kiri, or Maeda sensei. I want that ranking read back slowly. He put me in a list with a creator deity and 2 800-year-old immortals, and left out the man actually standing there. Then he settled, permanently, on the address, Toad Uncle. A living legend and a 9-year-old, comparing achievements like two kids comparing snack collections, while my other disciples stood off to the side watching a childhood illusion about the dignity of legends die quietly behind his mask. And then the toads challenged me to a cook-off, which is a sentence I get to say now. Gamma, keeping a promise made mid-battle, summoned the two elder sages of Mount Myoboku, Gamao and Kiri, 800 years apiece, the pair who ride his shoulders in sage mode. He introduced me as a culinary master and told them he'd traveled the entire ninja world and never tasted anything better. I said I wouldn't dare claim to be the best, since somewhere on an unknown mountain there is probably a better cook, which is the kind of modesty that costs nothing and buys everything. Kiri heard best in the ninja world anyway, took it as a formal declaration of war, and went home to prepare her signature insect feast for the judge's table. She returned with a purple soup in which arm-thick gray-green bugs floated like a threat, and a dish of finger-sized pink larvae under mystery brown sauce. My disciples looked at that table the way you look at a hostage situation. Kaito's throat performed a full rehearsal of surrender, and he asked out loud whether drinking the soup would kill them. Guy, a man of honor to his bones, ate a bug so that a chef's hour of work would not go unwitnessed. He described the flavor to me later as smelly socks rendered into sauce and poured over rotten mud. Then he gave Kiri a thumbs up and thanked her for the meal, because my student's politeness benches more than his taste buds. Her mood visibly improved. Diplomacy has many faces, some of them are chewing. I served tempura, jade soup, and stir-fried wild vegetables foraged from the hillside. Gamao took one bite of a vegetable and went absolutely still, then announced, with 8 centuries of authority, that eating my cooking felt like touching the true meaning of nature, and that the gap between my food and his wife's was the gap between ordinary ninjutsu and sage mode. In front of his wife. A brave amphibian. Kiri loaded her rebuttal, tasted the same dish, and forgot the rebuttal existed, then stopped being surprised entirely because surprise was costing her eating time. By the end of the night, the two sages were hinting through Gamma with the subtlety of falling furniture. Bring this young man to Mount Myoboku sometime. We would love to see what he does with our mountain's ingredients. Mount Myoboku, where sage mode is taught. The single best power multiplier available to a man with my chakra pool, and its front door had just been propped open by tempura. One caveat filed itself in the back of my head, cold and patient. The mountain's great toad sage sees the future in his dreams with a canon accuracy rate that terrifies me professionally. If everything can be observed in advance, is everything fixed, including the observing? I don't know. I stopped the spiral there because that road has no inn. But a prophet and a transmigrator in the same story is a coin I do not control, and someday that coin flips. I put it next to Juro in the monster file and went back to the party and made a second round of tempura because the first had been eaten by sages faster than I could fry it. We stayed in the war camp a few extra days to make sure Iwagakure had genuinely gone home, and then we packed up. Daiki saw us off at the gate and asked me to carry a message to Akane. He thought about it for a long moment, a man with 10,000 words in his chest, compressing, and produced. Tell her I'm doing well. Tell her to take care of herself. Tell her not to stay up late. Tell her to eat on time. I promised to relay it verbatim. Gamma slapped my shoulder hard enough to reset my spine and told me my battlefield merits had already been reported ahead of us and that there might be a surprise waiting at home. He'd written a personal letter to the Hokage about me. Then he ruined the moment by demanding a banquet on his return, and in the same breath told me my 3 disciples were excellent and that I should keep training them well. On the road out, he was privately thinking they might make the next generation of Sannin, and privately complaining that the ratio was wrong, 2 boys and 1 boy instead of 2 boys and a girl. Legends are just people with a longer complaint history. Konoha paid out like I'd won a lawsuit against fate itself. Konosuke heard my report, complained warmly that every single C rank he assigns me turns into an international incident, 4 in a row now, the 4th landing on a major offensive, and then upgraded the convoy mission to S rank on the strength of my performance. Then, at Gamma's written insistence, he logged the jinchuriki engagement as a second, separate S rank for me personally. 2 S ranks out of 1 grocery delivery. The commissions came to just under 2.5 million ryo before the village's progressive tax got its teeth in. Then the real payment. 10 jutsu of my choice from the ninjutsu pavilion, the underground vault where Konoha keeps everything from D rank to A rank, plus 2 A ranks taught personally by the 3rd Hokage. His own shuriken shadow clone technique, which he invented, and the water release great waterfall technique. I performed gratitude at a level that should have won regional theater awards. Sandame-sama, I will never forget your kindness. 90% acting. The 10% was real, because the old man was being genuinely, strategically generous, and a native Konoha ninja in my sandals would have been ready to die for him on the spot. That's the thing about Konosuke. He's not faking the warmth. He just also knows exactly what the warmth buys. The pavilion trip was a shopping spree with a strategy memo attached. Underground, guarded, laid out like a cramped library, 2-meter shelves of scrolls, each with a little plaque describing what it does to people. The clerk on duty took my voucher and gave me the standard kindly warning. Pick jutsu that suit you, not jutsu with impressive ranks. Sound advice. Wildly inapplicable. I went straight to the water release section and found what I came for. Water severing wave, the second Hokage's own technique, plaque practically apologizing for its difficulty. I already knew it. I'd known it for a year, illegally, from a lecture reward. Now I would know it with a receipt, because that is what all of this is for. Every jutsu I own needs a paper trail, a moment somebody can point to and say, ah, that's where he got it. I took Vortex from the Wind section, Thunderclap from Lightning, Earthflow Wall, and the Mystical Palm Jutsu, legalizing my medical ninjutsu so I could finally heal my own students in daylight instead of dragging them behind trees like a back alley surgeon. 6 nature transformations, all B rank and above. The clerk reviewed my basket, aged visibly, and asked if I was certain, because once he registered it there were no exchanges. I was certain. He registered a monster with a library card and wished me luck. The status screen that month deserved a frame. Chakra, 50,200. I transmigrated with 4,300. That's 12 times over in one school year, and almost none of it came from me. Mission payouts were the flashy part, but the bulk came from 4 children training every day and sending my cut home. Kaito's Sharingan had put his growth curve on a rocket, and I was collecting rent on it. 3 skills at perfect. 12 at proficient. All 7 nature transformations covered. I did the conversion into the only units I actually use. 50,000 chakra is 1 1/5 Minatos. It's 19.5 Kakashis. The line in my original evaluation that read Elite Chunin Cannon Fodder was now a historical document, filed next to a boy who used to lose fights to ice cubes. Delivering Daiki's message was the best diplomacy of my week. Akane beat me to our meeting spot, deliberately, 10 minutes early, hands on hips, chin up, announcing that this time, she was first. The woman keeps score on absolutely everything, including punctuality, against a man who is always early on principle. Then she demanded the photo I'd promised, the one guaranteed to make her laugh. I put Daiki's hostage smile on top of the stack. She laughed until she had to sit down. Then she asked, wiping her eyes, whether I'd used a genjutsu on him. How do you make a man's face do that? And I explained he'd had a battle that morning, was exhausted, and had been told the photo was for her, so he'd tried very hard to look energetic and happy simultaneously. She declared she was putting it in a frame. Not the good photos, that one. Then she flipped through the rest, Daiki serious, Daiki baffled, Daiki caught mid-thought, and went quiet, and looked at the sky, and said, war is a hateful thing. I let that sit because she'd earned it. Akane wasn't born here. She's from the land of whirlpools, a small green island country of Aoi who never once attacked anybody, whose sealing arts Konoha's own are built on, whose crest Konoha ninja still wear on their backs. She was sent here as a child because her chakra made her the right container for a monster. And then the news came from Aoi Mido that the land of whirlpools no longer existed, because multiple countries had gotten together and erased it. She hates war for the most concrete reason anyone can have. So I relayed Daiki's message word for word, doing well, take care of yourself, don't stay up late, eat on time, and she snorted that he treats her like a child who can't feed herself, and then glowed like a lantern for the rest of my afternoon. Then she cleared her throat, declared Akane's Fuinjutsu class officially in session, and demanded my progress report. I gave her a version of my progress from about 2 weeks behind where I actually was, because ANBU still watch me, and a root graduate who devours sealing arts is a root graduate with a scheduled accident. She was delighted anyway, told me I was learning fast, and said that from now on I could tell people she taught me my Fuinjutsu. Between drills, I floated my real dream at her. Rebuild the academy into a proper school system, elementary as it is now. Then a middle tier that actually teaches nature transformation. Then a university with majors, sealing, medicine, barrier arts. Akane called it impossible in one breath and appointed herself its future star sealing instructor in the next, which is the most Akane sequence of sentences available. And she was right that it's impossible. It's wartime. Konoha wants 12-year-olds on the line, and Konosuke is a man who loves stability the way fish love water. I let it drop. Impossible now. But I'm a patient man with a cheat and a grudge against this world's education budget. And I've noticed that in a place where strength writes the rules, someday impossible is just a scheduling problem. Learning jutsu from the Hokage came with a live studio audience of one extremely disloyal son. I arrived at the Sarutobi house at 7 in the evening, and Kenta greeted me happily, then heard that his father would be teaching me 2 A-rank techniques, and turned to Konosuke with the open, unguarded disbelief of a boy who has never once considered diplomacy. You? Teach Maeda-sensei? Teach him what, exactly? I watched 60 years of dignity take structural damage in real time. Konosuke led the 2 of us into his backyard, threw a handful of shuriken into the air, and performed the shuriken shadow clone technique. 1 shuriken became 2, 2 became 4, 4 became a horizon, thousands of them, in a heartbeat, hammering into the ground until the lawn was a pincushion and the grass had filed a grievance. He put his pipe back in his mouth and stroked his little beard with the serenity of a man who has just settled an argument in front of witnesses. Kenta rated it. The power's pretty good, I guess. Then I demonstrated my 1 week of practice. A few dozen shuriken, respectable, but nowhere near his, and Kenta exploded with as expected of Maeda sensei, learning it in days. Incredible. Konosuke choked on his own pipe smoke. Thousands. Pretty good. Dozens. Incredible. He looked at me with the specific despair of a father who has just been outscored by a stranger in his own yard and sent the boy inside to take a bath. Parenting by exile. Kenta left, cheering me on and casually informing me that the old man doesn't know how to teach anyone, so I should come back when I'd figured it out and teach him instead. I told Konosuke that children that age are rebellious and rarely mean what they say, which was a kind lie because Kenta meant every syllable. Konosuke said he'd understand everything when he grows up, which is what men who are excellent politicians and mediocre fathers say when the room gets quiet. Then he taught me the real trick of the technique, the trick to keeping the multiplication going, and, halfway through, asked me a question dressed as a passing thought. Maeda, what do you think of the academy, really? If you'd rather not be a school teacher, I can make you a Jonin instructor. You could keep the same students as your intern squad, more flexible hours, more time to grow your own strength, missions, money, resources. He was recruiting me properly now. A man who defeats an Explosion Corps elite is being wasted on attendance sheets, and he knew it. I declined, with the line I always use, which has the advantage of being true. I like teaching. I like the students. I feel relaxed and happy in that building. He wanted to say that you do not need this much strength to teach 9-year-olds. I watched the sentence get as far as his teeth and turn into encouragement instead, because it was my choice, and he respects choices. He concluded, privately, that I liked the academy because Root had shown me too much darkness, and a room full of innocent children was medicine. Fine, believe that. The truth is duller and worse for him. In that building, teaching pays better than fighting. And after the lesson, walking home under the Hokage's approving eyes, I got the sentence I'd been farming for since my first week. He decided that once the war ended, he would tighten his grip on Root. Zaku, he thought, you nearly ruined a genius. I collected that one like a rare coin and filed it with my monsters. At the training ground, my curriculum had moved past jutsu into something considerably more dangerous. I started teaching my disciples how this village actually works. Not history as the textbook tells it, history as an autopsy. I wrote a source passage on a board and gave them a real question. During the Warring States era, the Senju valued love and the Haruno valued power. They slaughtered each other for generations. And then Daisuke and Akio reconciled and founded Konoha together. Daisuke supported Akio for Hokage. Akio wanted it. Every clan and every resident voted for Daisuke. Analyze why Akio lost and Daisuke won. Kaito scratched his head and privately guessed it was because Akio defected, then wisely declined to say it out loud because he suspected the election came first. Guy proposed that Daisuke's youth simply burned more brightly. I awarded him half a point for effort and spirit. Ren got closest. The Haruno advocated power and had a bad reputation, so people backed the Senju, and then he added, silently, except Kaito, because my student is an anomaly among Haruno. I gave him 4 points out of 10. Then I gave them the missing half and watched a 6-year-old's spine go cold. Akio reconciled after losing, not as an equal partner walking in, as the defeated party who accepted terms. Every other clan joined Konoha by choice, the Haruno joined by surrender. One side were the victors with a good name, the other side were the losers with a bad one. Even if Daisuke personally wanted Akio in the chair, his followers were never going to allow it. Kaito asked why, in genuine confusion, weren't they all comrades by then? And I told him the sentence I actually needed him to carry. Even if you consider someone a comrade, that doesn't oblige them to consider you one. And there are always clan interests underneath. That's the part that lost him. He understood every individual word and not the sentence. That's fine. 9-year-olds are allowed to still believe the world runs on goodwill. I just needed the file open in his head for later. Then the second question, the one that mattered. After Daisuke died, I told them, Kenshin became second Hokage. To prevent another Akio, he integrated the Haruno and founded the Konoha police force, and handed the entire department to the clan, full authority over the village's public order, an honor, a gift. Shortly after, a faction of Haruno attempted a coup, failed under Anbu suppression, and from then on, Anbu watched the clan permanently, while its reputation rotted year over year. Analyze the police force's effect on the Haruno and why the public came to dislike them. Kaito's contribution was accidental and dead on. The police force meant clan members stopped interacting with outsiders. He'd been recruited into it himself. A man named Haruno Renjiro wanted him signed the day he graduated. I gave him a candy. Ren built the frame for me. Power breeds arrogance. Arrogance breeds the coup. The coup breeds the hatred. Sora added the piece only an Haruno would think of. Part of the coup's fuel was Akio himself, because a clan head's defection keeps giving orders long after he's gone. Then I put it together for them, out loud, in plain words, for the one student who needed to hear it assembled. The police force gave the Haruno power, I said, and power made them proud. It packed them into one department, which cut them off from every other family in my village. One clan controlling all of public order made every other clan and every ordinary resident nervous. An isolated clan grows more arrogant. An arrogant clan policing frightened neighbors generates incidents. Incidents generate rumors. The coup made the leadership permanently suspicious, and the whole thing spirals down forever. The second Hokage built the Haruno a beautiful palace with exactly one door and called it an honor. I left out the last piece, that a clan kept comfortable in a police station generates fewer Sharingan and fewer Mangekyo, which quietly weakens it across generations. Too much conspiracy for one afternoon. There's a sequence to these things. Sora checked every line of it against everything he'd ever seen at home and found no errors. Isamu pushing him toward the police force early, the clan's pride in its own cage. The looks on the street he'd asked me about on my first day, back when I invented a debt to his grandfather to earn a foothold in his life. He asked one question, quietly, and it was the right question. Did the second Hokage plan this from the beginning, or did the Haruno do it to themselves? Both, kid. That's what makes it a trap worth escaping. My life mission has your family's name on it, and you are going to be the one standing in the door when it matters, so start reading now. My goggled student, meanwhile, was still stuck on being popular. He'd genuinely never noticed anyone disliking the Haruno because old men and grandmothers adore him and try to feed him on sight. Yua confirmed it cheerfully. He went pink and said everyone's just enthusiastic, and Sora admitted privately that Kaito is the only Haruno he has ever met whom the villagers actually like, and that in this one area he cannot compete with him. Nobody in my clearing understood yet that the boy nobody in his clan respected is the only one of them this village would have followed. Then the village learned my name over breakfast. The Leaf newspaper is Konoha's official paper, founded by Kenshin, published irregularly, only when history actually moves. A war starting, a war turning, a new Hokage. I bought a copy on the way home and read it at my own table, and there it was across the top. Our forces have twice severely defeated the Iwagakure ninja force, victory in sight. The story ran the way stories run. Gamma first, commanding, embodying the will of fire, personally engaging the jinchuriki. Daiki next, the yellow flash, explained to a civilian readership. And then, further down, in print, in every tea house in my village, Kenjiro Maeda, inheritor of the will of fire, who chose to step onto a battlefield he had only been delivering rice to, defeated the explosion release hunter, and played a significant role in repelling the jinchuriki. Third name in the article, out of 5 names in the entire paper. My disciples appeared too, unnamed, as members of the squad led by Maeda, which is how newspapers handle children. From now on, I thought, folding it, I'm not an anonymous special jonin anymore. The office reaction was better than the article. Saito Takeshi read my name over lunch and short-circuited so completely that he assumed it was a different man with the same name, and had to verbally confirm with my shadow clone that his deskmate had fought tailed beasts. Suzuki Hana worked out that my recent leave requests lined up with the front. Tanaka Hiroki concluded that a man who teaches with shadow clones while running an intern squad was always going to turn out to be terrifying, and the only real mystery was why someone that strong stays in our building. Takeshi said out loud that if he had that strength, he'd be a Jonin instructor immediately, and then felt zero envy, because the gap was too wide to be envious across. He just felt happy for me. That man is the reason the staff room is my favorite place in Konoha. I gave them the modest version. I mostly assisted Lord Gamma and let it settle. 3 days of excitement, then back to tea and grading. Fame in a staff room has the half-life of a sandwich. My student, who does not read newspapers because that money could be snacks, spent the week grumbling that the whole village was talking about Toad Uncle when Maeda-sensei is also very amazing. Ren handed him the paper. He ran to Yua, sat down beside her, spread it across both their laps, and discovered that his own heroic contribution appeared as the phrase his squad members also contributed their share and understood and practiced the will of fire. He stared at that. When exactly had he understood and practiced the will of fire? He loses points on will of fire questions every single exam. Ren explained, with a level of patience I want noted, that the paper only prints the names of important people, and that in an article this size, only 5 Konoha ninja were named at all. Kaito counted them, found Maeda third with a decent paragraph, and made a private vow to one day be extensively featured, having noticed that the man with the most column inches was the one he refuses to call a sage. Fame produced side quests immediately, and one of them ambushed me on the street. Daiki had come home, the front had stabilized, Iwagakure pushed out of the land of grass, no treaty yet but the fighting paused, and we were walking with his teammates when 3 kunoichi spotted him. The lead one lit up like a festival lantern. Daiki, you're back. I read the paper. You and Lord Gamma repelled the jinchuriki. You're a hero of Konoha. Daiki corrected her, accurately and uselessly, that many people contributed. Then one of them noticed me, did the arithmetic on our 2 faces, and asked which of us was the older brother. I have a rehearsed answer now. My name is Kenjiro Maeda. I am not Daiki's older brother. I am not his younger brother. We are not blood relatives, and we are not distant relatives. Delivered smoothly, in one breath, like a man reciting an address. Daiki's expression didn't move. He's given up, too. Then the third girl recognized my name from the article, and the invitation came. Dinner, on them, to thank 2 tired heroes. We declined in stereo, in nearly identical gentle phrasing, which cannot have helped their theory about us being twins. They left comparing notes. One preferred Daiki, one thought I was more intellectual. All 3 agreed the evening was a loss. Behind us, Daiki's 2 teammates aged 4 years in public. Kazuo sighed that he should never have stood next to the 2 of us. There had been 3 girls, and not one of them had looked at him once. His partner put a hand on his shoulder and observed that Kazuo has never in his life been approached approached by anybody, and that today's failure could not fairly be blamed on the scenery. Some men fight jinchuriki. Some men stand next to two golden retrievers in human form and become furniture. And one quiet evening in my kitchen, chopping vegetables, I nudged history with a fingertip. Daiki was worrying out loud about Akane, about the day my village decides its jinchuriki belongs on a battlefield, about what happens when she meets another jinchuriki without a tailed beast ball of her own. He'd seen those two suns thrown at the land of grass, same as I had. He'd watched his own teacher, in sage mode, choose to dodge rather than block. And he said, half to himself, that it would be wonderful if there were a ninjutsu with power like a tailed beast ball. I kept chopping and said, in the tone of a man passing the salt, then why not develop one? He froze with a wet vegetable in his hand. If you want power similar to a technique, I said, imitating it and improving on it is usually the fastest road. Of course, I added, that's just talk. A tailed beast ball isn't something you can simply copy. Too late, his eyes had already lit. He was talking fast now, to himself as much as to me. They're all just ninjutsu. There's no law saying only tailed beasts can use them. We could build a human version. Start with a plain sphere of chakra, get the rotation stable, then I handed him his packed dinner and told him to get moving before it went cold because Akane was waiting. He thanked me and left in a fog of pure theory. I did the dishes and hummed. One shelf above my head, sealed away in storage, sat the finished prototype I built in this backyard a year ago and never once showed anyone. Someday he'll complete his version, and it will be brilliant, and it will be his, and he will never know that his neighbor beat him to it by years while grading papers. Neighbors keep secrets. That's what makes fences work. A week before the graduation exam, my disciples started behaving like criminals. It began at a dango shop, and I have the transcript from 3 separate confessions. My student ordered 5 servings, herded everyone into the darkest corner of the room, looked around twice, and opened the meeting in a low, conspiratorial voice. You all know what this is about. Yua whispered back that yes, they knew. It was about that. Guy whispered that yes, that. Ren said out loud, at normal volume, that they were discussing a thank you party for Maeda-sensei and asked whether the secret mission cosplay was strictly necessary. My goggled one's position was that vigilance matters. What if someone who knows Maeda-sensei overheard? Ren's position was that the odds of that specific coincidence at this specific dango shop were a rounding error, and that he'd love to see this level of caution deployed on one of my actual missions. Yua admitted she'd only whispered because Kaito looked so serious and she wanted to be supportive. Guy admitted he'd assumed they were integrating stealth into daily life as a training method and had been enjoying it enormously. Sora, 2 years younger than any of them and visibly the adult in the booth, cut in and asked them to please discuss the actual details. Here's what they were planning, and here's why it landed on me the way it did. 3 of them were about to graduate, my intern squad was about to dissolve, and every one of them had done the same arithmetic. No more training with Maeda-sensei from morning to afternoon, every day. So they decided to throw me a thank you party. Sora wasn't graduating, and wasn't on the intern squad, and it never occurred to a single one of them that he wouldn't be included, which is its own small victory and mine to keep. They picked the day the exam ends, so they could show up wearing their new headbands. Yua's idea, and it made my goggled student grin, because the boy who started my year at the bottom of the class wanted to thank me with his graduation on his forehead. Then came the hard part, what to actually give me. And that's where 5 children ran face first into the discovery that they didn't know very much about their teacher. Sora went first, since he'd known me longest. He sat there running through a year of memories and came up with 2 facts. Maeda-sensei likes calligraphy. Maeda-sensei likes teaching students. He tried to dig deeper and found nothing. He realized, sitting in that shop, that in all their time together, the traffic had run one direction. I knew everything about them, and they knew my personality and almost none of my life. He concluded that maybe when he was stronger, he'd finally be able to see more. That's a 6-year-old accurately diagnosing his teacher as a wall with a nice smile and deciding the solution is to get strong enough to help me. I want to be honest here, because he deserves it. That's not humility on my part, that's tradecraft. I built that wall on purpose, brick by brick, and the fact that a child ran into it while trying to buy me a present is the single most uncomfortable sentence in this entire year. Guy contributed that Maeda-sensei once said he likes egg dishes, which was true and which nobody else had retained, because Guy forgets the names of people he's met 3 times, but files every word I've ever said. They briefly considered all cooking me an egg dish, then discovered only Sora and Ren could cook, and abandoned it rather than make 2 people do all the work. Guy proposed making me a matching green jumpsuit. Sora rejected it. Kaito rejected it with prejudice, on the grounds that not everyone likes jumpsuits, especially green ones. He could not picture my face above one, and I'd like it on record that he was right. Ren went and asked Daiki, catching him buying breakfast. Daiki thought for several minutes and came up empty too. Sit with that. The man who eats at my table 3 nights a week could not name one preference of mine beyond cooking and sealing. So he told the boy the true thing instead. Conveying your feelings is enough. Just give what you want to give. Ren carried that back and said it better than any of them expected. Think about it. Does Maeda-sensei teach us so we'll give him good gifts? No. He'll be happy if we train hard. And Guy remembered, out of nowhere, the first time he ever placed first in a practical exam, and what I said to him that day. Your improvement is the best reward I could get. He'd assumed at the time it was a polite thing adults say. He'd spent a year discovering it wasn't. Then Yua solved it in one sentence, the way she solves most things while everyone else is shouting. Let's each carve a small statue of ourselves, and then all of us together carve Maeda-sensei, arranged the way we train. So even when we're not there, we're still there. Unanimous, instantly. 3 days for their own figures, 2 days for mine. What followed was a week of quiet disasters. Kaito carved himself, looked at the result, and threw it in the trash. Then he made a tactical decision and formed the seal. 2 shadow clones appeared. He drew breath to start negotiating. He'd prepared arguments, he told me later. He was ready to bargain, and one clone walked straight to the table, picked up a tool, and started practicing. The other found paper and began sketching on the floor, then looked up at the original and asked, with genuine irritation, what he was still standing around for. Kaito, who had been beaten up by his own clone over a homework worksheet, asked why they weren't slacking off this time. The clone in the chair answered, Maeda-sensei is so good to us. Obviously, we have to give him the best gift we can. He worked out the mechanism himself, lying in bed that night with his hands aching, and told me the theory later, like a scientist reporting a result. The clones share his heart, not just his memories. His heart refuses my homework. His heart does not refuse this. And then, because he is my student, he blamed the inventor of the technique for failing to account for it. Ren learned to make brushes from scratch. He studied hair types, examined the calligraphy pieces I'd given him closely enough to identify which brush I used, and made a goat hair brush by hand, and worried correctly that everyone would give me calligraphy supplies, and decided that if the gifts overlapped, it just meant everyone had thought hard. Sora went to a weapons shop called 10-10-10, where a young couple runs the counter, and collected a katana he'd commissioned months earlier, before the party was ever proposed, because I'd given him a blade and he'd decided to give me one back. Blood red hilt, flame orange scabbard with burning patterns down its length, specified by him because I taught him flame breathing. A meter of steel, which on a boy of 1 m is nearly a staff. He tested it on a wooden dummy without chakra, took its arm off, and reduced it to kindling. He paid the balance of 640,000 Rio on top of 160,000 deposit, 800,000 total, at an orphan's mission savings, spent without hesitation because he'd calculated that the short blade I forged him had cost me materials and time and secret medicines, and he intended to settle up. Then he went home and made the gift box himself because he couldn't forge the sword and needed some part of it to be his hands. They assembled at Ren's house on the 4th day, and the critique session is my favorite comedy of the season. Ren's statue was flawless down to the fold of the mask and the angle of the white fang blade. Yua said so out loud, and my goggled student arrived at a sprint specifically to find something wrong with it, and could not, so he graded it good. Quite similar, still room for improvement. Yua's was slightly rough on the clothing and lovely on the face, and he rated it invincible and perfect in every way, which surprised nobody in that room or in mine. His own figure had immaculate hand seals. He'd spent most of his hours on the fingers, a face like a thumb, and no goggles. Ren asked where the goggles were. Kaito claimed he had sculpted himself on a day he chose not to wear them. Ren said what a shame, he'd been about to offer to add them, but never mind then. I have rarely respected a 9-year-old more. Kaito folded within seconds, said actually he'd probably forgotten them that day, and asked for help. Ren asked him to repeat it because he hadn't heard. He had heard. And Kaito, dying inside, said it again, louder, with Guy walking in at the exact wrong moment. Ren then produced the goggles with earth release in about 90 seconds, fitted them, and fused them on. And Kaito discovered his painstaking week of hand carving had a shortcut he wasn't qualified to use. Guy's statue was a bowl cut, 2 enormous eyebrows, and 1 leg kicked out. Everything else was suggestion. It was also, Ren noted, the most recognizable of the lot. Then they built me. Yua assigned the work by demonstrated strength, Ren on my head, Kaito on my hands, and they added scenery. A broken tree beside Yua, a split wooden dummy beside Sora, scorch marks in front of Kaito, felled trunks around Guy, a severed stake at Ren's feet. Me in the center, equidistant from all 5 of them, smiling. Every one of my disciples mid-training, serious, on an ordinary day. They buried it in the south border forest under an earth release, at night, so I wouldn't spot them carrying a crate. I knew by then, obviously. I'd suspected for a week, Kaito's training progress dipping, Guy answering a routine 8 gates question with the face of a man hiding a body, 5 children going quiet at the same time every afternoon. And the confirmation was structural. Mika trains in the south border forest, so I keep a shadow clone hidden there permanently, and the clone watched 5 students bury a box in the dark with the stealth of a marching band. I could have looked into the crate. It's my forest, they're my students, and I own 2 dojutsu. I didn't. Some things you let happen to you. What I did instead was cancel the homework. I designed a new drill for Kaito and Sora, hit my shadow clone clone, 5 questions per minute of failure, 10-minute cap. And when Kaido asked warily whether this one came with problems attached, I said not for now, and shelved the penalty entirely. Kaito cheered and comprehensively ignored the words for now. Sora exhaled, because his gift box wasn't finished, and he wanted the joinery perfect. I'm not a rigid man. When my disciples need free time, they get free time, and they don't get told why. Far to the west, in a stone room I'd never see, the other half of the season's chessboard was being laid out. Juro, third Tsuchikage, sat in a high chair while his elders asked the obvious question. Would sending both jinchuriki out really make Kumogakure commit harder against Konoha? He explained it like a man explaining a joke he'd told 20 years ago. Of course, Kumogakure will conclude that Iwagakure spent its aces and failed, that we have nothing left, that we're one push from dropping out of the war. To keep us in it, they'll throw more strength at Konoha themselves. And when Kumogakure, Konoha, and Tsunagakure have all bled deep into each other, that is when Iwagakure, tens of thousands of ninja still sitting inside those mountains, untouched, unseen, comes down and takes the whole table. An elder objected that Kumogakure distrusts them. Juro called that the point. Let them underestimate us more. They're reckless. They will never imagine what's still in here. And the land of Earth is a fortress to invade, so a weak-looking Iwagakure simply isn't worth attacking next to the land of fire, which is my country, my village, and the address my students now report to. Then he named the memory driving all of it. Once, Iwagakure went to Konoha seeking an alliance and came home humiliated. Juro and his own teacher, the second Tsuchikage, both left severely injured. He wants Konoha beaten until Konoha comes to him for peace. His last instruction, keep sending ninja to fight. If we simply stop, they'll know. I'd read the shape of that from the middle of a victory celebration, standing in the cheering with a festival face on. The details were worse than my guess, and the details didn't change my schedule. That is next year's monster. This week had a graduation in it. Graduation morning, and I got every detail of it from 4 different mouths before dinner. Yua went to my student's house to make sure he wasn't late, the way she had 4 years earlier when he nearly missed his own enrollment, and found him already fed and dressed and puffing out his chest about being the man who will end the war and become Hokage and therefore does not repeat mistakes. She asked sweetly, leaning in with her hands behind her back, whether that meant he wouldn't need her help anymore. Kaito's brain seized. Saying he still needed help would surrender the speech he'd just given. Saying he didn't need Yua was structurally impossible. He escaped through the door I'd built for him myself, in a lecture he wasn't supposed to have absorbed. The Hokage needs comrades too. Daisuke became Hokage because everyone supported him, so of course I need your help, Yua. He thanked me internally for that lesson. I want it noted that a boy used my warring state's political analysis to survive a conversation with a girl. Education is a beautiful, unpredictable thing. On the walk-in, they collected Kiko and my cracker twins, still running the eternal con. Renzo announced he'd read too many novels lately and would surely bomb the exam. Jiro confessed he'd been gaming instead of reviewing. Kiko brightened because she had actually studied for 3 days and might finally beat them. And then the two of them agreed, casually, that no matter how badly they did, it couldn't possibly be worse than Kiko. She chased them all the way to my school gates. Yua laughed and told Kaido she saw him and Ren in those 3, which he rejected with his whole soul. The exam subject was announced by Tanaka Hiroki, homeroom teacher of class 2-4, the clone technique. The classroom split into celebration and despair along entirely arbitrary lines. My goggled student grinned because he runs shadow clones and the ordinary illusion version is paperwork. Guy pumped his fist because among the 3 basic techniques, the clone is the one his relationship with chakra can survive. Yua was indifferent since I have kept her basics uniformly clean all year. They were called one at a time into the next room, where the headbands were laid out on a table. Guy went early. My deskmate Tanaka Hiroki, who a year ago considered himself cursed for inheriting the 2 most notorious deadlasts in my building, and who has since won an outstanding teacher award off their backs, gave him 90 seconds and a kind smile. Guy took 2 deep breaths, formed the seals steadily, and produced 3 clones, identical, holding his pose. Tanaka had privately prepared a plan to petition the Hokage for a special exemption if my students simply couldn't do it, because a boy like that shouldn't be stopped by a technicality. He didn't need it. He handed over the headband and congratulated the newest genin in my grade, and Guy celebrated by announcing he would train twice as hard today to mark the occasion, which is not how celebration works and is exactly how he works. Then Kaito offered his 90 seconds, he declined them. No preparation needed, thanks, because it's a clone technique and he has waited long enough. 8 clones, in one motion, every one of them flawless, holding the seal, filling the room with smoke and identical grins. Tanaka Hiroki walked the line, checked each one, and marked the maximum score the Academy is capable of recording. Not a perfect score the way other students get perfect scores. The ceiling, 100. My student took his headband, asked who he'd be teamed with, was told that's the Hokage's decision and won't be posted for days, and then, at the door, delivered the grievance he'd been carrying all year. Teacher Tanaka, your lectures are really boring. You should learn from Teacher Maeda, and ran. Tanaka Hiroki stood there with a very complicated smile and consoled himself with the accurate observation that if the standard is Maeda, no teacher in this building clears it. I ran into the three of them wandering the grounds afterward, 2 headbands on foreheads, 1 tied at a waist. Yua had already fixed Kaito's, which had gone on crooked in his hurry, and he'd backed away red-faced when her face got close, and then claimed the crookedness was a deliberate personal style. She made him promise to wear it properly when meeting his new instructor, and he agreed while privately rejoicing that she pays that much attention to him. I congratulated them. From today, official ninja of Konoha. Kaito thanked me and said that at the start of the year he could only make 1 clone and wasn't sure he'd even pass. He's right. 12 months ago he was the bottom of the grade. Today he holds the school's maximum score, a 2 Tomoe Sharingan, and a mission record with 2 A ranks on it. Guy gave me a thumbs up and said ninjutsu is difficult, but with Maeda-sensei teaching, it becomes less difficult. I told them what I always tell them, you worked. No matter how much I teach, if you don't learn, nothing happens. It's true, and it's also load-bearing, because a child who believes his strength was given to him will stop when the gifts stop. Kaito was practically vibrating with the effort of not dragging me to the party early. He didn't because Sora's exam wasn't finished, and the schedule was sacred. We trained through the afternoon instead. Ren was already there, working with my clone, and greeted Kaito's swaggering announcement that he was an official ninja now with a flat reminder that he is a chunin and should be addressed as Lord Ren. Kaito went silent for a full 30 seconds trying to force the phrase out of his own mouth, failed, and settled for declaring he'd make chunin very soon. I flicked his forehead and, at the same time, sent a chakra tap across 10 meters into Ren's, and told them both that genin or chunin, they train hard, because I am still their teacher. Ren rubbed his forehead and privately noted that flicking a disciple's head from that distance takes an absurd technique. Sora came back from his own exam, and then, as I was about to end training for the day, the disciples didn't disperse. They surrounded me. Kaito, eyes bright. Maeda-sensei, close your eyes. We have a surprise. I closed them. I still had the transparent world, so nothing could actually happen, and also nothing was going to happen because these are the 5 children on this planet least likely to hurt me. Ren pulled the crate out of the ground with earth release. Kaito told me to open. A large gift box dusted with soil. 5 students standing around it saying thank you for your guidance in ragged unison. I opened it and the sculpture group was inside, and I want to describe what I actually did, which was stand there for a second longer than a composed man stands anywhere. I could see whose hands made what. Ren's figure with its meticulous mask folds, Guy's bold, simplified, unmistakable. Sora's holding a short blade rendered with more detail than the rest of the piece because it's the birthday blade I forged for him and he spent most of his hours on the small steel. Yua's, slightly rough on the clothing, careful on the face. Kaito's, with its immaculate hand seals and its retrofitted goggles. And me, in the middle. The head was extremely fine, proportionally accurate to my own skull, which I found unnerving and then flattering. And various parts of the body didn't quite agree with each other, and somebody had clearly gone over the whole thing at the end to harmonize it. 5 students arranged around me at equal distance, each mid-technique, each with a serious face. Fire release, thunder-breathing sword work, short blade practice, mystical palm, taijutsu. An ordinary training day, carved so it would keep happening. I told them I was very satisfied, and that it must have been hard to make this while still training Mika, and I put my hand on their heads one by one. Here's the true thing, and this is the last time I'll say it out loud this year. At the start, I taught Kaito with a completely mercenary goal. Trigger rewards, farm gratitude, build feedback loops. Somewhere in 12 months, the arithmetic reversed itself while I wasn't auditing, and now I prefer to let their emotions be real and take the rewards as a byproduct, because the system's actual thesis turns out to be the honest one. The stronger they get, the stronger I get. If they simply grow up healthy, I win. That's the whole cheat. I got paid to love these kids competently. Then Kaito said it's nothing compared to what you've given us. And Sora, smiling, 6 years old, family to your trust, told me I could afford to be greedier because your help to us passed the boundaries of an ordinary teacher a long time ago. And Guy started crying, obviously at full volume, and said it's because of you that my youth could ignite so quickly. Then his whole year came up behind it. The supplementary enrollment kid, the perennial last place, defeated by Ren in one move, dropped in the first round of my practical exam, standing in a market listening to grown men mock his father with no ability on earth to stop them. Then the exams he won, then the second market, and stone breathing, and 2 chunin on the ground, and his father's name protected by his own hands. Then beating the genius he'd spent his life chasing, and proving that a hard-working genius is still a genius. Yua said quietly that because Maeda-sensei is here, dreams don't seem so far out of reach. She has an enormous dream and no matching talent. End the war. Save the people it breaks. And she spent her years in my school admiring Ren, because a genius like that might manage it. Now she has the mystical palm I legalized for her, and a fist that puts Jonin through trees, and she has stopped assuming she'll be watching from the back. And Ren didn't say anything at first. He just went through it behind that mask. The riverbank where I found him hollow. The ambush where I came back for him and didn't so much as tear my clothes. The night he couldn't sleep. The breakfast after. My back standing between his squad and an enemy Jonin as the rear guard. Then he handed me a brush with the word conviction worked into the handle and said out loud that he was grateful for these few months. The other four produced their gifts in a scramble after that, because apparently the monument had only been the group project. Sora's katana came out first, longest and most conspicuous. I drew it and ran fire chakra down the blade, and it lit, flames trailing off the steel in the dusk, the scabbard's burning pattern suddenly less decorative and more like a warning label. Kaito shouted that he wanted to learn that, and I told him to keep working on flame breathing and reminded him not to practice indoors unless he wants to relocate his house. Kaito's inkstone came out next, with a dragon carved into it that was ambitious in concept and modest in execution, and he scratched his head and promised a better one when his skills improve. I told him this one is fine. It is. I could buy an inkstone. I cannot buy a week of a 9-year-old's evenings. Guy's gift genuinely surprised me. Not a jumpsuit. He'd wanted to, he confessed later, purely as promotional activity, and had held back on Kaito's advice, but a picture book. Hand-drawn, cartoon-styled, every event since the day we met, in order. A diary of a year, made by a boy with an average memory and no drawing ability, who solved both problems by refusing to accept them. Yua's was a flower she'd grown herself from seed, on the edge of blooming. I told her honestly that I have no experience keeping flowers alive, and that I would try my best, which is the most sincere gardening vow ever sworn. I gave them calligraphy in return, chosen individually, effort and self-improvement for Guy, conviction for Ren, something about not losing sight of your goal for Kaito. And Ren's gratitude crit the system so hard it dropped wind-release nature transformation at mastery into my head mid-conversation, which was both the 7th nature finally rounded out and, at that specific moment, the least interesting thing in the clearing. Then I fed all of them. Every dish I know from 2 lives, on one table, with extra portions packed for Akane and Daiki, who arrived to help cook and left with a bento as usual. Kaito activated his Sharingan at the dinner table to grab food faster. Ren reinforced his chopstick hand with chakra until it blurred. Guy ate like a natural disaster. Sora, who had never been to my main district house before, sat in the middle of the noise looking around at all of it, taking inventory of a room that contained his entire family. Somewhere in there, Kaito raised his cup of tea and said, to the table, that as long as Maeda-sensei is happy, their effort was worth it, and the 5 of them said, more or less together, your happiness is our greatest affirmation. They'd been listening to me say that to them for a year. They gave it back, with interest. The 4 days between graduation and team assignments were administrative, which in my village means photographs and paperwork. Registration portraits first. My student arrived with a vision, white robe, bamboo hat, mysterious wanderer energy, and the photographer rejected it without discussion and made him wear normal clothes like a person. Then class photos with teachers, which the school doesn't organize centrally, so every class handles its own. I appeared in nearly all of them because I taught the entire 4th grade during my summer camp, and I now own a stack of group portraits in which I am the only adult present in every single frame. Kaito used his camera for shots with his friends, and then a few of just him and Yua, without Ren, an omission he considers the finest photography of his career. Then my system paid the graduation bonus, and it was generous in a way I hadn't seen before. Sora's perfect academic score, chakra, and a proficiency scroll. Kaito's perfect graduation score, 600 chakra, and a ninjutsu mastery scroll, the first one I've ever been given, an item that lifts any technique I already know straight to mastery. Guy's excellent score, 450 and 3 proficiency scrolls. I tested the mastery scrolls limits immediately and found I can't spend it on nature transformation, only on concrete techniques. Fine. There is no such thing as too many mastery level jutsu in my inventory, and secret techniques and forbidden techniques both qualify, and if I collect enough of those I become a walking artillery platform with a teaching license. My chakra total, 53,200. I started this year with 4,300, annual growth of 48,900, which converts to 1 1/5 Minatos, or 19.5 Kakashis, and I will keep using those units until somebody makes me stop. Kaito's homework also changed, and he did not take it well. I'd moved him off academy questions onto Sora's kind political and historical analysis with source materials attached, because the original purpose of the old problems was fixing a broken foundation and farming exam rewards, and both jobs were finished. He looked at his new sheet, found a question asking him to analyze the second Hokage's intent in founding the Ninja Academy, and asked whether I'd handed him Sora's paper by mistake. He went and checked Sora's. Sora's was unchanged. My student developed a very bad feeling, correctly. That night, he tried to delegate to shadow clones and learned that the goodwill from my sculpture had expired. One clone lay down on his bed and said flatly, "There is no way I'm doing test papers." The other threatened to beat him up. He dispelled them both rather than lose another fight to himself, and worked through the questions alone, and wrote down his honest guesses where he had nothing, which is exactly what I asked for. Then he couldn't sleep, because he could not stop trying to work out what Kenshin had actually been thinking. He dreamed about being interrogated by a cold-faced, white-haired man, demanding the significance of his own policies, woke up soaked in sweat, and felt relieved to remember the second Hokage died before he was born. I consider that a successful assignment. Then he saw the clock, discovered it was 10:30 on the morning the lists went up, and detonated out of the house. He'd slept in because his grandmother saw how tired he was and let him. He didn't blame her for it, and I don't either. He'd been late collecting his enrollment papers 4 years ago, and was now late collecting his graduation papers, which he described to himself as at least consistent. Yua was already outside his door, holding both sets of documents. She'd collected his. Again, she told him that even though he's gotten strong, he's still unreliable, and that she'd have come to wake him if she hadn't had plans with her friends. He thanked her with the specific relief of a boy discovering his mistake was already handled by somebody who knows him, a feeling I have watched that girl hand him roughly 40 times this year. Then he asked, going slightly red, whether they'd been put on the same team. And my sweetest student lowered her head, let her voice fall, let the light go out of her eyes and said, "Team assignments, huh?" It's a bit of a shame. His stomach went through the floor. He'd known the odds were bad. 40 in a class, 3 to a team, plus cross-class assignments. He started to say, "It's okay, Yua, when you go on missions in future, you must." "We were assigned together," she said, smiling. "We can train together and go on missions together." He stood there while his face cycled from grief to disbelief into a joy with no dignity anywhere in it. A minute earlier, he'd been cold under a summer sun and convinced the passing ants were mocking him. Now every breath was a miracle. She'd waited hours at my school for him, and when he never showed, she'd walked over to deliver his papers and collect her revenge, and she told him so with a tilt of her head and a smile with a hook in it. I taught that girl medical ninjutsu and a punch that folds jonin. Her cruelty is entirely her own work, and I refuse all credit. He apologized formally, hands together, bowing. She forgave him instantly because, after all, you're Kaito, and if you ever stopped needing my care, that would be genuinely surprising. Then he asked who the third member was. Not Guy, not Ryuji, not anyone he guessed. Someone, she said, who was surprising in every sense of the word, and she declined to name him because she wanted to watch his face. Having recently listened to my two boys loudly agree how unlucky they would be to share a squad, I knew what was on that list before my student did, because I run an academy office and I use every privilege it gives me. But I got the story behind it from Daiki himself, over vegetables, the way I get most things. Konosuke had called him in and asked whether he'd thought about becoming an instructor. Daiki thought about Gamma, a man who behaves like an idiot on his own time and becomes absolutely reliable the moment training starts, who treated his students like friends instead of subordinates, and whom Daiki credits for most of his own strength. Then he thought about my camp on the land of grass front, and 3 children who talked back to a legendary Sannin and obeyed their own sensei without a blink. He said yes. He wanted disciples like mine. He told me that to my face while washing my vegetables, and I have decided not to examine how that made me feel. Then Konosuke handed him 3 files. Kita Ren, Chunin. Daiki remembered him from the battlefield and reasoned, correctly, that my intern squad dissolves at graduation and the boy needs a home. Then he read the file and sighed for the White Fang. Haruno Kaito, the goggled boy who'd photographed him at the camp and accused us of being separated twins. Daiki looked at his mission record, 2 A ranks and an S rank attached to a student who hadn't graduated yet, with no C ranks anywhere in the history, and needed a moment with it. He could account for the S rank, since the war landed on top of us. He could not account for the A ranks at all. He concluded it was an unprecedented academy record, and there would probably never be another one, which I consider a fair reading of my year. Then the third file, and he exhaled because it said Nohara Yua and not Spirit Guy. If it had said Spirit Guy, he intended to walk into the Hokage's office and ask what the point of such an arrangement was. 2 of his 3 were mine. He was already planning to raise it with me over dinner, and then Konosuke gave him the real assignment underneath the assignment. Pay special attention to Ren. You know Hisashi Kita. After that incident, the boy changed, and changed badly, and thanks to Maeda's efforts, he seems to have come back to himself, but I don't know whether it will hold. Watch him closely. That's why my 2 other students are on that squad at all. The old man deliberately surrounded Ren with the only 2 people who'd already reached him, so my repair work wouldn't come apart under a new instructor. Daiki said he'd have done it anyway, because otherwise he wouldn't deserve to be called a teacher. He came over that evening, washed vegetables at my sink, and told me he was a teacher now too, though not at the academy, so an instructor should count. I told him he'd been my Fuinjutsu teacher for months already. He deflected the credit to Akane, which is accurate and also modest, and then mentioned his squad file was a little strange, since 2 of the 3 were my disciples. 3 of 3, I said. Yua is also mine. I took her during the 4th grade special training when I noticed her potential. I watched him do the arithmetic on that coincidence and land somewhere between amused and unnerved. Then he asked the question everyone eventually asks me. Why don't you just become an instructor, Maeda? Then you could keep teaching them. Same answer I give the Hokage. I prefer the academy, and I can guide them in my own hours anyway. I did not give him the real reason, which is arithmetic. My disciples' mission rewards flow to me whether Daiki leads them or I do. About a third less without my squad leader bonus, but they keep arriving. Meanwhile, a full lecture hall pays better per hour than anything on the mission board. I'm not choosing sentiment over profit. I'm choosing the better investment and enjoying that it happens to be the kind one. Then he asked me to teach him how to teach, sometime, since Konosuke had personally praised my educational ability. The future fourth Hokage, asking his neighbor for pedagogy notes. I said of course, and did not smile until he'd left. The bell test came the next morning at Training Ground 12, and I got it in 3 versions that night. Kaito's with sound effects, Ren's with corrections, and Daiki's over my chopping board, so I'm confident in the reconstruction. He'd gotten the trick from the veteran Jonin instructors. The essence, they told him, is to go easy. Once you feel the students genuinely cooperating on offense, pretend to be careless and let a bell go. He brought 2 bells because 2 were what he had on him, and when my student immediately asked whether 1 bell counts for the whole team or only its taker, Daiki realized he hadn't thought that far, and improvised that any single bell passes everyone. Then he sat against a tree with a book and privately worried about whether to comfort them or be strict when they failed. First time teaching. All 3 of them mine. If he taught them badly, how would he explain it to me? His words, not my pressure, though I admit I enjoyed hearing them. Yua asked whether the boys had done this before, since neither looked surprised. My student confirmed cheerfully that Maeda-sensei ran them through a bell test during the internship, with 3 bells, he added, because our sensei had enough for everyone. She worried about being the only one without experience. He told her it doesn't matter, because the exercise is about teamwork and nothing else, and privately noted that against a stranger the experience is worthless anyway, since they knew nothing about Daiki's actual abilities. That's a boy who has been taught to value information above comfort. I'd like credit for that one. Ren built the plan. Known facts. Captain Daiki is very strong and has an extremely fast body flicker they'd witnessed once on a battlefield. Requirement. More information. Method. Traps first, then bait him through the trap zone and read his answers. And, a lesson he learned the hard way in my bell test, he assigned a shadow clone to hold permanent eyes on Daiki while they worked, so nobody could slip a clone behind their real bodies. Kaito volunteered for traps, announcing that he'd learned tons of them from Maeda-sensei and dragged Yua along to help. He knows he's bad at strategy and didn't argue with Ren about it, which is real growth in a boy who once lost an argument to his own clone about fractions. They opened with a 4-meter great fireball and a screen of shuriken to shrink his dodging space. Daiki didn't dodge. He formed seals on the spot and answered with a fire-release flame bullet that ate my student's fireball and kept coming, a reminder that the yellow flash knows the basics too, at Jonin scale. Ren silently logged fire release and moved. Into the trap zone. Yua triggered the wires, a wall of shuriken flew, and Daiki, who hadn't even seen where my girl was hiding, answered with a wind-release great breakthrough that scattered every projectile. Ren logged wind release, noted 2 natures as standard for a Jonin, and Kaito came in on the follow-through with a spinning kick. Daiki caught his leg, complimented their coordination, remarked that it would be better if a third person joined in, and threw him into a tree. That Kaito burst into smoke. A shadow clone that had cast a full-scale great fireball, which made Daiki revise his estimate of my students upward on the spot. Then 2 thick wooden pillars swung out of the tree line at him, and the tempo never let up. He shifted left, threw marked kunai toward my other 2, and started hunting for Kaito's real body. Ren came in with a kunai aimed at vital points, lost the exchange on pure skill, and held anyway, because the whole attack was a setup. While Daiki was blocking a thrust at his heart, my medic condensed chakra into her arm and swung. Strength of 100. A slender girl's fist against a Jonin's palm, and the sound needed no translation. Daiki was driven back 2 meters and said out loud that he hadn't expected this seemingly ordinary child to hold that kind of power. My student, Tuesday afternoons, you're welcome. Ren took the opening, forced him further back, and then stopped and formed seals and said, explode. Buried tags detonated under Daiki's position. My student's real body appeared in a tree, sealing the escape lane with Phoenix Sage fire. Smoke everywhere. Then he jogged over to Yua and asked with genuine anxiety whether they'd killed Daiki-sensei, since he hadn't seemed to dodge, and added that this would be very awkward because Daiki is Maeda-sensei's friend. I appreciate the priorities. Ren told him to consider that it took all 3 of them to handle 1 Kumogakure Jonin, and that Daiki is obviously not an ordinary Jonin. The smoke cleared onto scorched, empty ground, and Daiki's voice came from behind them, saying they genuinely surprised him, and he'd have to respond more seriously. Kaito put himself in front of Yua and went to full breathing. Ren wasn't shocked at all. Maeda-sensei said he was strong, so it would be strange if 1 wave took him down. I taught him that too. Never be surprised when a monster survives your opening. What followed was a clinic. Daiki scattered markers. My 3 read the field. He flickered in beside Kaito and Yua and swept both into a tree with taijutsu too fast to see. Ren watched where he'd appeared, remembered a kunai had been lying there, and started tracking every blade on the ground. My student, furious at being knocked around in front of Yua, lit his feet with flame-breathing fire and kicked. Missed. Went down flat on his face in the dirt. And from there, face down, he formed one-handed seals and spat fireballs out of the ground, which made Daiki exclaim out loud because a boy pinned like that should not be casting anything. I taught him one-handed seals in the spring. He complained the entire time. Daiki vanished again, and my disciple, who had by then reverse-engineered the entire mechanic, burst forward with thunder breathing at full concentration and lightning-natured legs, sprinting not at Daiki, but at the kunai he had calculated Daiki would choose, the one nearest Yua, the one not covered in my other student's fire, the one inside range. He guessed right. Daiki, mid-teleport, found a 9-year-old already arriving at his destination and had to abandon his own attack to defend, thinking, he's worked out Flying Thunder God already? What analytical ability? The strike missed. Ren smiled under his mask anyway, because the strike was never the point, and Daiki spotted the explosive tag stuck to the boy 1 instant before he said explode. That Ren was a clone. He'd been a clone since they went looking. Kaito's clone was bait 1, his own was bait 2. And when Daiki teleported clear to the first marker on the field, my real disciple was waiting there with purple lightning crawling down his arm. He didn't aim at Daiki, he aimed at the bell. A thread of lightning knocked it loose, and he caught it out of the air at full thunder-breathing speed. Daiki-sensei, he asked, calm as a bank clerk, does this count as a successful training exercise? It counted. Daiki told my 3 honestly that their performance greatly surprised him, and he had been holding back enormously, not even using his sensory abilities, and he is still the yellow flash. Kaito's fire was not only powerful, but came out of release methods he didn't recognize, which are of course mine. Ren analyzed his signature technique in a handful of exchanges and immediately built a plan to beat it. And Yua forced him to use Flying Thunder God with a single punch. His private verdict? An ordinary jonin who wasn't careful might genuinely lose to those 3. Yua apologized for not being much use, which broke my heart secondhand. Kaito rejected it immediately and specifically. Without you, Ren's clone would have been finished long before, and the punch that knocked Daiki-sensei back was really cool. Ren agreed and pointed out she simply plays a different role, and privately assessed the squad as better balanced than my intern team had been, because now they have a medic instead of 3 people who all charge forward. She felt better and privately resolved to train her taijutsu harder anyway. That's the correct response, and I intend to feed it. And Daiki, watching my alumni bicker about their own performance, thought that my intern program should be promoted village-wide, because if every future graduate coordinated like this, Konoha's genin would be transformed. I'll take that as a performance review. Guy's assignment made me sit up when I read the list, and I read the list early because I am an academy administrator, and I use every privilege that comes with the chair. His teammates were Shiranui Yori and Sho, the weapons specialist and the sunglasses tactician, both solid, both his friends, and Sho being the same boy who invented the adult enemy confusion technique at my summer camp and has been paying for it socially ever since. Yori met Guy on the road and called his own luck good, then asked whether he could ask about taijutsu sometimes. Guy said of course, gave him a thumbs up, and started doing one-finger push-ups while they waited, and invited the other 2 to join. Both declined politely, on the grounds that they didn't know what training was coming and would rather arrive with stamina. Their instructor arrived 5 minutes late, eating a rice ball, in a yellow tracksuit and yellow tights, and standing about 1.5 meters tall. Wu. I had to sit with that name for a second when Guy told me. Wu Sensei, Konoha's strongest taijutsu user, creator of the Leaf Dragon God, a man who takes a student roughly once a decade so his art doesn't die with him. Konosuke had personally dragged him back into instructing because an unprecedented taijutsu genius had appeared in my academy, which is bureaucratic language for Guy happen. And Wu had agreed conditionally. He'd test the so-called genius himself, and if the boy didn't measure up, back to school and he resigns. He opened by informing 3 fresh genin that failing his training means revoked ninja status and another year in my classroom, which is within an instructor's authority and which nobody had warned them about. Yori nearly came apart. Sho, who reads about the wider world for fun, adjusted his sunglasses and started getting excited, because if this is that Wu Sensei, then becoming his student is a career. Bell test again. 1 bell. Take it by nightfall or go back to school. Then he sat down and produced a book with a lightly dressed older woman on the cover, and read. They laid traps. They lured him in. Sho triggered a full curtain of shuriken, and Wu looked at the incoming steel, looked at the layout, and said with real disappointment, "Is that all?" Leaf Dragon God. He spun, and his chakra came out with him, and the air twisted into a green dragon 20 meters tall that ate the shuriken, the wires, the traps, and most of the surrounding landscape. Yori dropped his kunai and began mentally drafting his explanation to his juniors about why he was back in my classroom. Sho had never seen anything on that scale in his life, and my student's face lit up like a festival, which is the part of this story I love, because that is exactly how I raised him to react to a wall. He had found Konoha's strongest taijutsu user. The man had just done something magnificent, and Guy's whole operating system treats that as the best possible news. He set his breathing, went to my stone breathing at full concentration, and opened with a Konoha whirlwind at top speed. Wu caught it on one palm without moving his feet, said the kick had decent speed but lacked power, and tossed him away. He landed clean, laughed, and came back with a leaf-strong whirlwind that bent the grass in a circle around the impact, a technique I never taught him, incidentally. He built that one himself. Wu caught it too, still without moving, said still not enough power, and threw him hard enough to plow a 10-meter trench. Then he mocked the other two for standing around watching their comrade attack alone, which snapped both into the fight and got both kicked away in one exchange. Yori into a tree, Sho into the ground, with a verdict attached that I would have phrased more kindly and not softened by much. Your power is insufficient, your movements are sluggish, not a single taijutsu form of yours is decent. Yori, near the top of his year in my school, felt his face burn and charged back in alone with a body flicker. Wu vanished from in front of him, reappeared behind him, and kicked him in the backside hard enough to launch him. And my student opened the first gate and caught him out of the air. That's the moment I care about in this entire exam, not the technique, the choice. I drilled him, and his father drilled him, on when a gate is worth its cost, and he spent his first one catching a teammate. Yori thanked him and apologized for being impulsive. Guy laughed it off and said nobody enjoys being told they're worthless. Sho, thinking clearly under pressure, redesigned the plan. He and Yori go in first as the distraction, and Guy, the only one fast enough, goes for the bell. They used clone techniques to muddy the approach, which fooled a veteran Jonin for approximately 0 seconds, and Wu dropped both of them again. But Guy had already loaded his legs, and he came in with shave, my technique, taught in my camp, and got a hand within centimeters of the bell. Wu caught his wrist and looked at him with actual appreciation. You can go faster than that, he said. You've surprised me a little. Konosuke wasn't exaggerating, he thought. Then he said the thing that mattered. It's a pity your comrades are so far behind you. If they could have troubled me a bit more, you might have succeeded, and elbowed him away at a speed Guy couldn't answer. So my student got up again with no decline in his fighting spirit whatsoever, and asked what if my strength were even greater, and opened the second gate on top of stone breathing, which is his current physical ceiling, and invited Wu to look for the limit. He built distance, accelerated the whole way in, and unleashed the noon leopard. Every scrap of gate-fed chakra dumped into a multi-burst shave and one kick, like a hunting cat with a single fang. Yori's jaw came open, because Guy had never used that in a school practical exam. He realized he'd spent 4 years being casually beaten by a boy who was holding back, and then realized why, since a full-power kick at that level would have killed a classmate. That's my instruction too, incidentally. I taught him what to leave out of a school ring. Sho got stuck on a different question entirely. No clan, no powerful father, nothing inherited. Where does that come from? Wu stopped being composed. He gathered chakra into his leg and met the kick with a whirlwind of his own, and the ground detonated between them and drove Yori and Sho back a few steps. Guy flew back 5 meters. Wu's body moved an imperceptible amount. Still not enough, he said, keep practicing, while privately noting that leg strength like that at that age is incredible, and while having already decided to take the team, because it would be a crime not to teach my student. And then my 3 won the bell anyway, and they won it in the stupidest, most Konoha way available. Sho remembered the cover of the book his new instructor had been reading, and gambled on the technique that has ruined his reputation since he sat in my camp at 9 years old. Enemy confusion technique. 5 scantily clad illusions at point-blank range with a shouted, "Wu sensei, look over here." Wu, Konoha's strongest taijutsu user, midway through designing a training plan for a prodigy, looked, and his gaze locked, and his nose opened. Yori spat the senbon he'd been holding in his teeth, clipped the bell off its string, and Guy, still in second gate at full concentration, was already diving to catch it out of the air. Sho stood there in pure disbelief. Guy's terrifying taijutsu had failed, his own disgraceful ninjutsu had worked, and for one horrible instant he had the thought, is this technique actually amazing? Yori congratulated him by declaring that he truly lives up to his reputation as the 4th grade's famous pervert ninja. Sho explained, again, uselessly, that he did not develop it and that it was invented by 2 ninjutsu geniuses, my cracker twins for the record, who transformed into a chair the first time and have never been held accountable for anything since. Yori put him in a headlock and said, yes, you merely enjoy swimsuit magazines in your free time. Wu wiped his nose and observed that kids these days are not to be underestimated. Then he passed all 3 of them because he made the rules and can do what he likes with them, and because he had decided the moment my student stood up out of that trench. So let the record show, Konoha's strongest taijutsu master lost a bell to a technique invented in my summer camp by 3 of my students. I heard the whole story from Guy over dinner and had to put my tea down. Not long after, I opened my system's mentor-disciple panel to check the life missions, which I do occasionally the way you check a slow investment. Guy's progress had led for months at 0.5%. Sora's had never moved at all. And Kaito's, become Hokage, had jumped from nothing to 3% in a single step. It took me about a second to find the cause. Daiki, because the hat in my village has always run on lineage as much as ability. Konosuke was Kenshin's student. Daiki is Konosuke's grand student through Gamma. In the future, I remember, Rika is Konosuke's student and Ren is Daiki's. It's never only the teaching bloodline. Gamma raised 2 other students nobody ever pictured in that chair because they lack the ability, but lineage is a multiplier that scales with everything under it. Power without pedigree stalls. Pedigree without power is a joke. Both together is a coronation. And my student had just become the disciple of the man who will be Fourth Hokage, which makes him the previous Hokage's grand student and the next one's direct student, stacking buffs on a boy who cannot reliably name 5 strong ninja. 3%. The tracker will move again when Daiki takes the hat, and I intend to be standing very close by when it does. Meanwhile, my evenings had split 3 ways, and I liked all of them. Great waterfall drills under Konosuke at his house at 7, with Kenta heckling from the sidelines. Fuing jutsu at home by lamplight, and wind release lessons for Kenta himself, since my academy's new term was 10 days out, and I'd promised to make him worth the Chunin exam recommendation his father keeps dangling. That last one produced my favorite domestic scene of the season. Konosuke didn't want Kenta tagging along to my water release lesson because he knew exactly what would happen. Kenta announced he wasn't coming to learn from him anyway, since watching a man perform something once and say a few words teaches nothing. Konosuke protested that everything he says is the essence and the key points. Kenta said he only recognizes results, and that with me, he learns things quickly. He keeps a private ranking, by the way. Me first, his father second, his Jonin instructor third. He has told his father this out loud, in his father's house, more than once. I stepped in as mediator, confirmed that the third Hokage's guidance is genuinely useful. It is, and then asked for Kenta to come along, since I'd made real progress in wind release and could teach him a little. It was the correct move in every direction. Ease the room, help the boy, and bank goodwill with the man who signs my promotions. Konosuke agreed, and reminded Kenta that the Chunin exams aren't far off, and that if he gets strong enough, his instructor will recommend him. Kenta said, "Do I even need you to tell me that?" Their whole walk to the river ran like that. Barbed, constant, and unmistakably warm underneath, a father and a son who irritate each other in every sentence and would take a blade for each other without discussion. I performed the great waterfall for inspection, took the old man's corrections, and improved visibly inside a few attempts. Kenta cheered out loud and said, "Maeda-sensei, you still claim you're not a genius, and you can learn that fast even from the old man." Konosuke went home after that, and walking back, he had a thought he decided to shelve until the war ends, that his 3 famous students never inherited his actual specialty, the 1,000 techniques, the combination ninjutsu, and that I am a weakened copy of himself and might, with proper training, become the next professor. Take a number, Sandame-sama. There's a line for me now, and Zaku is still holding a ticket somewhere in it. I got the next part in installments. My goggled student's version at my dinner table, with sound effects. My silver-haired one's corrections, delivered flatly, over his own bowl. And Daiki's actual report to me later, over vegetables, once the children had gone home. Between the 3 of them, I can reconstruct the whole week, and I intend to, because it is the funniest one my alumni have ever had. Act 1, the mission desk. The registration ninja there is Yamada Akio, an old node in my student's grandmother network, whom he greets as Uncle Yamada. Yamada informed the new squad cheerfully that fresh genin take D ranks. My student asked him to pick out a nice C rank. Yamada said no. My student said fine, we'll pick ourselves. Yamada clarified that the no covered the entire category. Kaito was genuinely bewildered, and I understand why. They had C rank clearance as my interns. He personally has an S rank on file. And now he's back to picking up trash. Yamada explained it with the patience of a man who has said it 10,000 times. That clearance belonged to my squad. This is Daiki's squad, different members, different leader, so you follow the standard rules. And even if you can handle a C rank, you have to consider whether your teammates can. My silver-haired one wore the expression of a boy who called it. He'd been through this himself, since even a Chunin does chores when he joins a new team. And my goggled one's resume, however remarkable it looks on an academy transcript, is nowhere near enough to bend a village rule, a lesson I could have taught him for free. Daiki had seen it coming and started browsing the D-rank scroll because he wasn't going to bully a desk clerk. And then my student had an idea. He remembered that under me they only earned C-rank access after clearing out every available D-rank. So he asked Daiki to take 10 at once, framed as helping Yua get familiar with mission work, and then pitched Ren outside. Let's use shadow clones, 2 each, plus our bodies, 6 workers, and Yua. Ren asked why they should exhaust themselves. My student explained the plan. Ren said it wouldn't necessarily work, and my student immediately said, fine, then let's compete, unless a Chunin is afraid of losing to a Genin. Cheapest taunt in my entire curriculum. I have watched it work on that boy 9 times. My alumni cleared 30 D ranks in a single day. Yua sped up just to keep pace with 2 idiots racing each other through my village. Kaito went home wrecked from dispelling clones, and decided to do it again tomorrow. I found out because my system paid me for it. Disciple Ren and Disciple Haruno Kaito completed the entrusted mission. Growth reward, chakra +5, then +4. Then, by the end, 2 or 3 points for both of them combined, because the system scales rewards to difficulty, and my students had become substantially too strong to be paid for finding a cat. It still added up. 30 tiny payouts beat a day of lectures, and I hadn't left my house. I sat there feeling like a landlord. They came back the next afternoon demanding 10 more, and Yamada told them there were none left. There were plenty. He simply couldn't keep feeding one squad because other Genin have to eat, and at my alumni's rate, half the village's rookies would have been unemployed by the weekend. Kaito celebrated celebrated anyway, asked whether that meant C ranks now, was told no, and then spotted the third Hokage sitting nearby and walked straight over. Act 2. My student complained directly to the leader of the village that being a full ninja is worse than being an intern. Then he made his case with total confidence. Uncle Hokage, you know my strength, and Ren is a chunin, and Yua isn't weak either. He was prepared to fire a full-power fireball as evidence and was stopped only by being indoors. Konosuke agreed that my two could obviously handle it and then did the thing that makes him good at his job. He asked the man responsible, "Daiki, do you think their strength is sufficient?" Daiki said, "No problem at all." He'd have said the same about B ranks, having been personally forced to use Flying Thunder God twice by these children. So Konosuke walked to the registration desk and instructed them that Daiki's squad no longer follows new genin standards. Rules exist to protect rookies. My rookies had outgrown the protection. Kaito ran back to Yua taking full credit. She praised him and quietly discarded the consoling speech she'd prepared. Ren pointed out, accurately, that what actually worked was my internship record on their files and having Daiki as captain, not 30 lost cats, and my student informed him he was simply jealous of that intelligence and asked why, if Ren is so clever, he never found a way to get C ranks. Ren chose not to raise Kaito's academic record in front of the Hokage. I want that mercy noted in his file. Their first C rank was an escort to the Land of Hot Springs, which Daiki picked after Kaito asked the desk whether any missions passed through beautiful scenery, and got told, this is work, not a vacation. The client, a pleasant civilian named Sato Kenji, spent the road recommending the country's hot springs and a street where every household grows roses so the petals blow down the whole lane when they bloom. Yua's eyes lit up. Kaito filed the name away without a word, which is the single most competent piece of espionage my student has ever performed. The desk had also warned them that Cloud Ninja were active in the Land of Hot Springs, and before departure, Kaito made Ren go on record with a prediction, because Ren's forecasts had failed 4 times running and my student now treats him as a cursed instrument. He explained the phenomenon to Yua with complete seriousness. Pay attention to Ren's words. If he says nothing will go wrong, that is exactly when something goes wrong. Ren objected that it was coincidence. Kaito asked how 4 in a row is coincidence, and demanded a forecast. Ren waited honestly, an entire country, a destination near the Land of Fire border, and surely it cannot go wrong 5 times running, and said nothing will go wrong with this mission. They met the Fourth Raikage on day 3. Daiki's sensory net caught them first, and one of those signatures was enormous. He ordered my 3 to hide because the objective is the client and there's no need for extra combat, and then learned the other side had a sensor of their own when the enemy formation turned and came straight at them. He handed Ren a marked kunai. My disciple had performed best in the bell test, so my disciple got the lifeline, and I want to note that Daiki reached that conclusion in about 4 days. Jin took one look at the Konoha headband and called it perfect. His sensor, Seiji, supplied the file. Probably Kazama Daiki, called the Yellow Flash by Iwagakure, said to be extremely fast. Jin said he'd like to see how fast, the same sentence, more or less, that he aimed at me on a bandit road 2 months earlier and dropped into lightning chakra mode. Kaito, up a tree, recognized both of them instantly. The same Raika candidate I'd fought on the bandit mission, the one I'd held while my squad withdrew, and started to say so out loud before Ren killed it with a look. That encounter stays between the 4 of us. The official version has us meeting only the Cloud Jonin who died. Kaito shut his mouth so fast he nearly bit through it, and I have never been prouder of him for saying nothing. Venom Ryu was there this time. The new AB combo built their reputation on the corpses of famous Sunagakure veterans, and Daiki's brow came down, because those 2 are not an easy afternoon. He threw 3 marked kunai. 2 hit trees. The 3rd flew at the Cloud group and got batted out of the air by Ryu's blade. A Cloud ninja mocked the throw. 3 kunai and not 1 close. What kind of aim is that? Which is precisely the sound a man makes moments before his education begins. Daiki suggested they leave. He said he'd rather not waste energy outside his mission, which is a sentence I've used myself and which has never once worked on anybody. Jin pointed out that nobody walks away from an enemy and charged, and to everyone watching, his body stopped existing and became a streak of blue light. Kaito, seeing that come in, silently revised his policy on betting with Ren. If Maeda-sensei were here, he thought, I wouldn't even be nervous, because he'd watch me fight that man to a standstill and walk us out. With Daiki, he wasn't sure. He'd never seen him fight seriously. He was about to. Daiki didn't move until the last instant. Then he lofted a kunai gently upward, not a throw, a toss, and vanished. Jin's charge went through empty air. He stood in the ruins of his own momentum, wearing an expression I have personally put on that face. Total incomprehension. And then the man he was hunting materialized above him, caught the falling kunai, poured chakra into his arm, and drove it down. Jin saw it and had no answer, until Ryu fired a lightning blade over his brother's head and forced Daiki to abort and flicker back to a tree. Then Ryu said the sentence that reorganized the fight. Big brother, that guy can move through space using those kunai. He worked it out from 3 data points in under a minute, and I want to give the boy his due, because grown jonin have died without noticing that pattern. Jin memorized every marker on the field, since with his speed he can reach any of them instantly and only needs to force 1 more teleport. Daiki read the plan off his face and scattered 3 more kunai to multiply the options. While the monsters played chess, my students got the mortals. Seiji peeled off with 3 Cloud Ninja and went for the children, planning to kill them to break Daiki's focus. He didn't recognize Kaito or Ren because on our last encounter I'd had them transformed. My student told Yua to take the client and fall back and put himself and Ren in front. The boy who used to be dead last in my grade made the correct tactical call in half a second, and Ren agreed with it, which for those two counts as a treaty. He opened with a great fireball as a probe. Ren threw a curtain of shuriken to interfere. The 4 Cloud Ninja split, flickered clear of the fire, batted the steel aside without breaking stride, and kept coming, and my disciple's read came back grim, no genin among them. He tested the leader directly, nods at thunder-breathing speed, my technique, my drills, on loan to a Cloud Jonin's face, and his short blade rang off Seiji's sword. Seiji complimented his speed, pushed him back, and turned the blade into a lightning sword. A burning kunai from Kaito forced the abort. Ren rejoined and gave the verdict. The leader is a Jonin, the others are at least Chunin. My student's problem was arithmetic. He and Ren could hold 1 Jonin between them. 3 Chunin on top of that is a loss, and there was no version of this where they sent Yua to fight 3 alone. So Ren solved it with the marked kunai in his pouch. He looked across the field, and Daiki was already looking back, waiting for exactly this, and my disciple threw the lifeline at the enemy Jonin. Seiji saw a blade thrown by a child and didn't examine it. He twisted aside and moved to keep charging. Daiki arrived behind him, put the kunai through him, held him long enough to leave a mark on his body, and threw him at Jin. Jin caught his sensor, tore the kunai out, threw it away, and had him treated, and his face changed, because there are exactly 2 people in that unit he loves, Ryu and Seiji, a rare sensory talent loyal to the bone. He ordered him to stay beside Ryu and not move again. I keep that detail. A man who has exactly 2 people is a man with exactly 2 handles on him. That one exchange cracked the children's fight open. Ren charged the nearest Cloud Ninja and opened him up. Kaito went to full 2 Tomoe Sharingan plus flame breathing and held 2 enemies alone, and thanked me for it, mid-fight, in his own head, because a year of my evasion drills plus those eyes meant 2 grown ninja combining ninjutsu and taijutsu could not touch his clothes. He couldn't finish either of them. He didn't have to. He only had to hold until Ren came free. Then Yua ran in to help, and one of the Cloud Ninja made a career-ending assessment out loud. This Haruno is difficult, so I'll grab his companion and threaten him with her. He'd concluded she was weak because she'd been standing back instead of casting. Kaito clocked him, breaking off, understood exactly what was about to happen to him, and went back to his own fight without a word. The man threw a punch at Yua's head, meaning to knock her out. Yua poured half her total chakra into one arm and swung. He looked at her thin white forearm on the way in with visible contempt. The sound was enormous. He went backward at speed, hit a tree, and broke it. His teammate stopped mid-exchange with my student to stare. Is that how you take a hostage? And the man on the ground could not move his fingers and could not accept that a scrawny little girl had shattered every bone in his hand. That is my student. I taught her that punch on a Tuesday because I refused to raise a medic who can only run. Kaito took the distraction and put the other one down with a Konoha whirlwind. And across the field, Daiki ended it in one move. He teleported, not to any kunai, but directly beside Venom Ryu, blade at his head, using the mark he'd left on Seiji's body. Jin went grim. There's no kunai there. Can he carve that technique onto people? Ryu's reaction was inhuman. He didn't turn. He simply angled his sword back at Daiki and said, perfectly calm, "If you want a mutual kill, then come on. I'm not afraid." He believed his brother would avenge him, and that a wounded yellow flash would then lose to Jin, and he ran that entire calculation in the time it takes to blink. Daiki praised him out loud for it. Your reactions and decisiveness are enough to earn the name Ninja Killer, and then open the door. How about we both step back? We have no conflicting missions. This isn't a battlefield. He never intended to kill Ryu. Killing Ryu turns Jin into a natural disaster, and with 3 of my 9-year-olds behind him, he couldn't promise to protect them from that. He'd wounded Seiji instead of killing him for the same reason. Keep the exit open. And privately, he thought Ryu had a real future, and so did my 2 boys, and that it was genuinely unclear which of the 3 ends up strongest. Jin called the halt. He would not trade his brother for a wounded Daiki. Both sides stopped. My students closed ranks around the client, and Jin said, with weight in it, "Kazama Daiki, I'll remember you. You're very good." "I won't forget you either," Daiki said, and I believe him, because he told me afterward, in my kitchen, that he has a feeling they'll meet again in something much larger. They separated. The Cloud carried their wounded off, and Daiki delivered one extremely religious-feeling civilian and took the squad straight home without lingering. Ren's forecasting record is now 0 for 5, 2 of those involving a Raikage candidate. Kaito has the statistic memorized and deploys it whenever the room goes quiet. Daiki gave them 4 days off to recover from meeting a Kage candidate, which is standard practice and which Kaito received like a prison sentence. 4 consecutive days. He'd never taken 4 consecutive days off in his life. With me, the pattern was rest the day you get back, resume the next morning, take 1 or 2 more if you're genuinely wrecked. Ren said 4 days was normal given who they'd met, and privately thought that if every instructor were like me, extra holidays wouldn't be necessary at all, because my pace is tight and I never force anyone, and somehow my students end up training on their own holidays anyway. He's right. That's the whole design. Both of them then went home, waited a respectable interval, and snuck off to the south border forest to secretly out-train each other. They ran into each other on the path. My silver-haired disciple, who had planned to quietly bank a full day's head start, felt a flicker of regret. My goggled one, who had planned exactly the same thing, discovered Ren had been secretly grinding for a whole day already and was retroactively furious about it. They exchanged one look, said nothing useful, and walked into my forest side by side like two men who have agreed not to acknowledge a crime they are both committing. I greeted them with a straight face and asked why they were here. Didn't Daiki take you out today? I already knew about the mission, because the system had paid me 700 chakra for it that morning, and 700 from 2 disciples with no squad leader bonus means something went badly sideways, which raised a question I'd been carrying for months and finally had to concede. I used to assume the constant disasters on our missions were my fault, that I was selecting for danger without noticing. Turns out I wasn't selecting anything. Kaito and Ren are simply cursed. 5 for 5, without me anywhere near the paperwork. Kaito told me the whole story at maximum volume, starting with Ren's mouth being a ninjutsu and finishing with the Raikage candidate, and Ren objecting throughout that it was a coincidence and the desk had literally warned them about Cloud Ninja in the region, and Kaito closing the argument with the number 5. Then we trained, because the story could wait for dinner. Ren went to thunder-breathing constant state work, holding total concentration as long as his stamina allows. That's his real bottleneck, and I'd been thinking about it for weeks. His speed already outruns his own reaction time. The technique is throttled, not by his legs, but by how fast his mind can process what his legs are doing. Reaction drills have a ceiling. Constant state raises the floor, permanently. Until he solves it, using his top speed is a bet that the enemy can't react either, and I do not raise students who gamble. Kaito got a new fire technique because I decided he lacked a wide area option with real weight behind it. I took him to the riverside so the forest would survive, and he asked hopefully whether it was the Sea of Fire from our first C rank, the one he's never forgotten. No, I told him, but not weaker. Fire release, Fire Dragon Flame Bullet, from a scroll Zaku once gave me, which pleases me every time I use it. I explained the release principle and the key points, then demonstrated. The flames of this one are wrong compared to normal fire release, violent enough to split and strike from several directions at once, which is exactly why controlling them is a nightmare. Used carelessly, the achievement isn't hitting the enemy, it's not setting yourself on fire. Under my control, it forked into 3 streams that hit the river and boiled it, throwing white mist up until the surface looked uneven to the naked eye. Kaito nodded like a pecking bird and promised not to spam it like a great fireball, having heard the words consumes a lot of chakra, and immediately ignored 90% of them. Then I broke it down piece by piece and demonstrated each part, which I would never do for Sora. He infers whole techniques from one showing, and detailed explanation wastes his time, because teaching the same way to different students is just laziness with a lesson plan, and the system rang. You taught your disciple Fire Release, Fire Dragon Flame Bullet. Due to the disciple's gratitude, the reward critically hit. Ninjutsu acquired, Water Prison Technique, proficient. Maybe it had been a while since he'd been taught something personally. Maybe he'd missed me. Either way, the boy's affection paid me a technique that traps a target in a sphere of water, which is useful for holding enemies and occasionally for not dying, and I thanked him by making him do the drill 40 more times. I fed all 3 of them that night. Daiki arrived first, as usual, and went straight to the sink to wash vegetables, because he stopped being a guest in this kitchen months ago. Guy turned up next and greeted Ren with a challenge to a pleasant taijutsu battle, which Ren declined on the grounds that dinner was almost ready, the only reliable defense he's found. Guy had news. Wu-sensei wanted to meet me. He'd told his new instructor about the regimen I built for him, and Wu had gotten worried, because by Wu's standards, and the man is strict, Guy's daily volume is far beyond what a body that age should survive. He warned him it would wreck him in middle age. Guy laughed and said Maeda-sensei adjusted it for him personally, so there won't be problems. Which is true, and which I can prove, and which Wu had no reason on earth to believe. He asked who this Maeda was, fully prepared to discover a charlatan preying on his student, and Guy answered, with total sincerity and a face full of pride, that Kenjiro Maeda is a ninja whose taijutsu is no worse than yours, to Konoha's strongest taijutsu user, out loud. Guy privately believes that if I use the 8 gates and breathing marks together, Wu simply cannot beat me, and he only softened it to no worse than because I've asked him to keep his mouth shut about my ceiling. He'd watched me spar his own father at 6 gates. He's the only one of my students who knows the actual number. Wu recognized my name from the newspaper, the Land of Grass, the jinchuriki, and concluded I was probably not a fraud, since men who fight tailed beasts rarely need to lie about training schedules, so he sent an invitation through Guy. Find a time, I'd like to talk with him. I said yes immediately. Tell him tomorrow. I'm free all week. He can choose the hour. And then I sat in my own kitchen and did the math on it. A discussion between 2 taijutsu specialists reliably turns into a spar. If Wu opens with the Leaf Dragon God in front of me, then I have a witness. Then I have a source. Then I can start using the Leaf Dragon God in public without anyone asking where a school teacher learned it. My system handed me that technique a year ago off Guy's gratitude. I have never once been able to explain owning it. Kaito, who had never heard the name, asked who Wu-sensei was. Ren asked him how many strong ninja he can name besides me and Daiki. Kaito said the 3rd Hokage and Toad Uncle, and then got stuck for a long, silent, mathematically embarrassing while. Ren informed him that the 3rd Hokage's name is Konosuke Sarutobi, and that Gamma is not called Toad. My student rallied with Rika, which counts, and then died in open water. Ren listed powerful Konoha Jonin like a man counting coins, starting, I noted with interest, with Zaku Shimura, Hokage advisor, student of the second, powerful, and by the time he reached Orochimaru, my goggled disciple was changing the subject with the desperation of a drowning man. The subject he changed it to was whether I could beat Wu-sensei with taijutsu alone. Wu-sensei's taijutsu is very strong, I said, but I shouldn't lose. Kaito translated that instantly into, so you'll definitely win, and I flicked his forehead, and every one of them silently agreed with his translation. Especially Guy, who practices both the 8 gates and stone breathing, and knows exactly what those two do when stacked, and who has spent a year quietly wondering how long his teacher has been training, if a single year got him this far. 2 days later, the Haruno clan held its young ninja exchange meeting. My student heard about it from his grandmother, who mentioned that Haruno Renjiro had come by with gifts and an invitation while he was away on my mission. Kaito asked what an exchange meeting even is, people chatting? And she said there would be sparring and prizes for winning, and that his father used to attend. He stopped moving. He rarely hears anything about his father. She couldn't remember what prize his father had won and apologized for it, and I want to note what that costs an old woman, realizing out loud that she's forgotten so much of her own son. What she did remember was him coming home happy and talking for hours about how strong the seniors were and how hard he'd worked to beat one opponent. She told Kaito he didn't have to go if he didn't want to. They'd never know when his mission ended. She knows he's never gotten along with the clan. Kaito said he'd go because there were prizes and no entry fee. He asked Sora about it at my dinner table, and Sora confirmed he'd been invited too. Technically, you're supposed to be a ninja to attend, but Isamu had decided the clan should interact more and sent one anyway. Ren lost interest the moment he heard it was internal clan business. Kaito perked up violently when Sora mentioned the prize pool. Strong performers can be rewarded with advanced fire release techniques, plus ninja tools and secret medicines. Advanced fire release. He'd just learned a powerful one from me, but you can never have too many. And, this is the part that got me, he reasoned that if the clan gave him one I didn't know, he could practice it with me. He wanted to bring something home to his teacher. Sora went for a different reason entirely, and his reason is why I've been teaching that boy political history since spring. After a year of my source analysis questions and my lectures on the police force, he'd worked something out. The Haruno clan's current position is substantially the clan's own doing. Not long after the village was founded, their leader defected and later came back to fight the first Hokage hard enough to carve a national landmark into the map. Then, under the second, the Hawks tried to seize the Hokage seat by force, worse than Akio, in Sora's assessment, because that one was a coup attempt against the village itself. So my youngest disciple was going to that exchange meeting to count, to look at the younger generation of his clan and measure how many were Doves and how many were Hawks, because if the Hawks outnumber, the coup happens again, and he intends to know before it does. I never told him to do that. I only gave him the reading list. 6 years old, running a clan-wide political survey at a family sports day. That's not a student anymore. That's a colleague. I got this whole afternoon secondhand from 2 boys talking over each other at my table, and I have cross-checked their versions against each other's pride. The meeting was held in a courtyard inside the compound, chatting indoors, sparring in the open space. Isamu and Elder Renjiro presiding from a tea pavilion as judges. My youngest was the only person present without a headband. Haruno Ryuji, the boy my Kaito beat on the practical exam stage a year ago, was talking to a senior named Haruno Issei and greeted Sora warmly. Issei asked who the small one was, and Ryuji explained, "That's Sora, still a prospective second year, and don't let his age fool you. He's stronger than me, the newest genius our clan has produced." He said it without a trace of resentment, because Ryuji is a completely normal Haruno who believes in strength and has therefore been treating a 6-year-old as his boss for a year. Then Issei noticed Kaito and asked, and Ryuji's expression got complicated. "That's Haruno Kaito, graduated this year, same as me." Issei recognized the name from a rumor about a clan dead last, and Ryuji corrected the record. His grades used to be terrible. He's not the dead last anymore. His strength exploded in 4th grade. He could probably pass the Chunin exams right now. All of which Ryuji said while privately remembering that either of my boys would overwhelm him without effort. Issei went over to introduce himself, called both my Haruno geniuses of the clan, and offered guidance. He'd graduated at 10, made Chunin at 12, and walked into the police force at 13 on his own strength, and he was the most respected of that courtyard's young generation. He told them the Haruno don't do false modesty. We speak with strength. Strong is strong. Which, as an operating principle, is why I've never worried about my 2 surviving that room. My student asked him directly how one gets rewarded a high-level fire release. Issei laughed and said, joking, that beating him in combat would certainly do it. Kaito said then, "I challenge you." Issei accepted with genuine approval, because challenging upward is a virtue in that clan, and told him to fight all out and hold nothing back. He did not believe a 9-year-old could hurt him. He'd passed the Chunin exams last year, and he assumed Ryuji simply didn't understand how hard they are. Ryuji refereed, In the pavilion, Renjiro nodded at my student approvingly, good talent, willing to challenge, and privately rated him the second best Haruno of his age after Sora. Isamu noted that Issei was steady and reliable in the police force. The rest of the young Haruno barely came outside to watch, on the assumption that a senior guiding a junior is not interesting. My boy went to flame breathing and studied his opponent, confused, because Issei wasn't moving at all and appeared to be nothing but openings. In every fight of his life, my classroom, my missions, my war, nobody has ever just stood there, so he assumed it was a tactic. He opened with a great fireball, 4 meters across, as a probe. Issei's face changed as it came in, because his own full-power great fireball at 13 is about that size, and my student is 9. He answered with his own and cancelled it out, and the collision was loud enough and bright enough to empty the house into the courtyard. In the pavilion, Isamu sat forward and said, surprised, that this Kaito has a very strong fire release talent. Renjiro agreed and admitted he couldn't produce that fireball at 9. I could have told either of them where it came from. 200 melted ice cubes and 1 bowl of my Mapo tofu. Isamu decided then and there to award him a B-rank fire technique. Then Issei charged, having reasoned that a boy that good at ninjutsu at that age can't possibly have had time for taijutsu. Kaito, watching him come, thought his speed was slow and wondered whether that was another tactic. It was not another tactic. Kaito set his breathing to full concentration, burst forward, and hit him with a whirlwind kick. Issei was airborne before he processed the movement. 4 meters, then the ground, hard, and then a period of lying there asking himself the 3 great questions. Who am I? Where am I? What am I supposed to be doing? Kaito was also confused. His taijutsu hadn't improved much lately, so why had the man folded so easily? The courtyard was not confused. They didn't know my student, but every one of them knew Issei, the young expert who has attended every exchange meeting since he made Genin and challenges upward every single year. And he had just been removed from the field by a child in goggles. The name Haruno Kaito went around that yard, collided with the old rumor about a clan dead last, and overrode it while I was at home washing rice. Issei got up, admitted internally that he'd underestimated the opponent, and stopped treating him as a junior. It didn't help. My student closed with full concentration breathing and beat him in close combat again. Issei switched to Phoenix Sage Fire, and my boy answered with the shuriken-loaded version, Phoenix Sage Flower Claw Crimson, which I taught Sora and which he absorbed by standing nearby. It ate the incoming fire and cut the man with superheated steel on the way through. Then Kaito put him on the ground and set a kunai against his neck and asked, casually, whether that counted as a win. It counted. Then my student offered Issei a hand up and asked with real concern whether he needed the hospital, because he genuinely likes the man who so generously handed him an advanced fire technique. Issei took the hand, said it was just a scratch, and walked into the house to be alone for a while, patted on the shoulder by Ryuji, who understands that exact feeling better than anyone alive, having received it from my student first. And that would have been the day's headline, except Sora watched the crowd gather around Kaito and made a tactical decision. He needed the clan's young generation to talk to him if he was going to survey them. Strength is the only currency in that courtyard. So he skipped every Haruno without a Chunin vest, found one who looked about 14, walked up, bowed politely, and said, "Hello, senior. I'm Sora Haruno. I'd like to challenge you." Haruto accepted, mostly out of convenience. He had a real match planned against someone else and assumed this one would be quick. His friend Kosuke warned him that Issei had just been stunned by a fresh graduate and that geniuses can't be judged by common sense. Haruto said it's different, that my older Haruno has years on my younger one, and asked how strong an academy student could possibly be. I have an answer to that question. I've had it since my first week in that building. Isamu asked for a prediction, said it's hard to say, and then leaned forward because he'd invited my youngest specifically to find out. Sora went to flame breathing and closed. Their exchange looked even to an untrained eye, and wasn't. Haruto's attacks were being blocked, and my students weren't. He hadn't even entered full concentration yet. The courtyard started making noise, because a 6-year-old was outpacing a Chunin in taijutsu, and Ryuji, who knew Sora was stronger than him and had never once pictured this much stronger, remembered with growing horror that my student's ninjutsu is better than his taijutsu. Haruto, no fool about his own weaknesses, disengaged and went to ninjutsu, a 3-meter great fireball, everything he had. All thought of conserving chakra abandoned. Sora set his breathing to the limit and answered with a great fireball over 4 meters. They collided, and the flames threw shadows across the faces of the whole clan. And when the same technique meets itself, the stronger one simply continues. Haruto's died. My students kept coming, and while the Chunin was busy dodging his own defeat, Sora closed with the extreme speed body flicker I drilled into him all spring, put him on the ground, and set a kunai against him. Kosuke announced his friend's defeat with visible reluctance. My student thanked his senior for the match and helped him up, and Haruto, to his enormous credit, said out loud that he hadn't gone easy, and that Sora is the most talented person he has ever seen. In the pavilion, Renjiro said, with something close to shame, that this boy just finished his first year in my academy and isn't yet 7, and that he'd already tried to overestimate him and still come up short. And Isamu said the sentence I have been steering towards since the day I invented a debt to Haruno Akihiko in an empty classroom. Sora's talent might surpass Senior Akihiko's. If he keeps growing like this, and he's Akihiko's descendant, he might really have a chance to become Hokage, and Haruno Hokage. The thing the doves have waited generations for, and the hawks intend to take by force. Isamu sat in his pavilion, feeling his clan turn a corner, with 2 geniuses surfacing at once, and decided to pour resources into both of my students. He has no idea that his clan's survival is currently a quest entry in my head, with a fail-state attached, or that both of his geniuses come home to my kitchen for dinner and argue over the last piece of fish. So that's my year. 12 months ago, I woke up inside a stranger's body, holding an attendance sheet with 4,300 chakra, a spy seal on my tongue, and a class roster that read like a list of future gravestones. Tonight, I own 53,000 chakra and 7 natures, 2 S ranks in my village's newspaper, a sword forged by one of my students, and a brush carved by another, and not one name on my roster is where it was supposed to be. My dead last has a Sharingan, a rival he can beat, a Hokage quest ticking on my panel, and a clan that suddenly wants to fund him. My boy with no talent has 2 forbidden arts, the strongest taijutsu master in the village as a teacher, and a father this place salutes while he is still alive to hear it. My broken prodigy sleeps through the night and throws himself into fights for his friends. My girl, the one who is going to die screaming with a hand through her chest, puts Jonin through trees. And my youngest, the boy whose eyes were going to be harvested, is sitting in a clan pavilion being called a future Hokage by the man who was supposed to help bury him. Which brings me to the quiet part. The part I sit with after my dishes are done and my house is empty. Because Zaku read that newspaper too. Somewhere behind a bandaged eye, the man who raised this body from childhood was reminded that the asset he was forced to hand over became the story of the season. And Zaku doesn't experience regret, he experiences inventory. Konoha's strongest taijutsu user has sent a message asking to meet me. Konosuke has started thinking the word disciple in my direction. Isamu is personally interested in 2 children who call me sensei. And on a mountain full of toads, there is an ancient prophet who dreams true futures, and Gamma has promised to take me to him. I came into this world as a piece somebody else had already placed on the board. 1 year of teaching, and every player at that table has noticed me, and not one of them knows what I actually am. Ask me again in 4 years, when the war comes for my students, whether I think that was a good trade. Class dismissed, for now.